online? Can you hear me well? Those online?
Yes.
Perfect. Great.
Sorry, we can't hear anything online.
Works. Let me just pause for a sec. Check online. Can you hear us now?
Yes.
For now. Perfect. Thank you. So next is what are the Africa team is trying to do. We have a few research scientists, as we see, came from different parts of Africa, but we also have great AI residents and interns who also is sound is gone. Critical challenge for policymakers is to understand the population, where the people are in the first place, whether you are designing an intervention for agriculture or healthcare, you need to identify where they are. So population and then migration mapping is one. Food security and sustainability is also equally critical. Just quickly, I will not go through much of the different public health, agriculture, biodiversity projects we have been doing in close collaboration with many partners. But something I would like to highlight is how we really make sure that we collaborate with the right stakeholders in many projects we do. That's, we believe, is a way to build AI solution to be impactful. Just Microsoft, the fact that we have the skill set on AI or computing doesn't mean that we understand public health or agriculture or disaster management. And hence, when we try to build solutions, we go to the domain experts and we co-develop from day one. And these are some of the project partners we have been engaging over the years in different sectors, because it's clear that at this time and age, no one really can do it alone. So if you are working in that space, we are always open to collaborate, but that, multi-stakeholder collaboration is, I believe, our identity at Microsoft AI for Good Love. But of course, as an applied research team and team of scientists, we also provide, insights in scientific domains, whether it's full research papers, perspectives, shaping policymakers through white papers, and so on. So we have the mix of those experiences beyond the daily solution development with stakeholders at Microsoft AI for Good Lab. We are also keen in engaging ourselves across different grassroots communities in Africa. If you know, if you are in touch with AI and solution development the right way in the continent, I'm sure you know about deep learning in Daba. We are going to meet in Lagos in first week of August this year. We have Data Science Africa, GeoAI Africa, but that's how we try to tackle challenges in the continent as well. In addition to governments, big tech, and ecosystem, grassroots communities are the key shaping factors for AI in Africa. And of course, at Microsoft AI for Good Lab, we are also keen participants in that space. So finalizing my just quick intro about AI for Good Lab, I just want to make a couple of announcements since you are here. One is Lingua Africa call. This is a call we work with Gates Foundation, Masakane, and many others in supporting solution development in low resource languages in Africa. It has been, I think, announced in the AI Summit in India, but the call will be soon out. So I'm sure most of you here work on language, voice, data collection, ASR, but also, just beyond generic data collection. If you are aiming to build solution for education, food security, health, and government service, because we need to step up from data collection into actually build solution that's useful for, policymakers, decision makers. Watch out in the next 1 week or 2 weeks. This call will be out and hope to receive as many applications as possible in that regard. Two, if you are also a student, as I said, every summer we bring a couple of residents for 6 months internship with us at Microsoft AI for Good Lab. That has also be out this week. So if you know someone working in a space similar to what I mentioned, AI for Good Lab, please share that insight and happy to, get those applications from the community. If you have any questions, of course, feel free to connect with me through the email and the contact provided. And again, thanks for coming. Next, I will invite to make her opening remark to Dr. Jackie O'Neill, my good colleague here at Microsoft, but also lead for Microsoft Research Africa, to her opening remark. Jackie, the floor is yours.
Okay. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about MSR Africa. For those of you who don't know much about us, but I'm also going to talk about how our main aim is to build better AI by centering African voices. And I'll have a little bit of a focus on the speech work that we do. Okay, so I'm going to start by introducing our lab. So our mission statement, our motto, the way we think about doing research is, if you design for Africa, you're designing for the whole world. There are many constraints, opportunities, challenges, innovative ways of working sorry, I just stand here so that people online can see me. I can't see these guys over there, which is a bit sad. I think when they designed this room, they should have had an HCI person designing it. Anyway, yes, the challenges, the opportunities, the ways of working that you find in Africa. If you can design technology that's mobile first, that's lightweight, that works well for different languages, different cultures, different modalities, that's going to be technology that makes life and work better for everybody everywhere in the world. And actually, when I set up the lab in 2020, that was my pitch for setting it up, that Microsoft could learn a lot from understanding how work was done and how people interacted with technology on the continent. This is the fantastic team. We are small but mighty. And one of the things I think that's really important to note about the team is that we are multidisciplinary by design. So I don't believe that you can make great AI technology if you're just a machine learning person. You need machine learning combined with human computer interaction, combined with design, combined with engineering, combined with, as my great colleague Girmaw said, deep expertise in the field that you're designing for, deep health expertise. You need to involve doctors if you're doing things in health, farmers if you're doing things in agriculture. And so our research really focuses on centering African voices. And we're really coming up with like new paradigms for human-centered AI. So why do we need this? Well, the models and tools we have now, that I'm sure every single person in the room can relate to this, do not work equally well for all communities and businesses. And it's one of the things I think that's really interesting when you give these talks. When I talk to people in India, I talk to people in countries in Africa, they all get this. You talk to people in the UK and they're not sure. Like, they think, well, it works all right for me. So, but actually lots of people are excluded from the technology. And the reason for this is because the design and building of generative AI has been largely a technical enterprise, and it's been primarily driven by the global north. And why does this matter? Well, one thing that's really important is that how work is organized is not the same the world over. So technologies that are designed for one setting don't necessarily work well in another setting. So if we think about mobile versus desktop, we can think about infrastructural differences. One of my biggest frustrations now is that laptops are increasingly reliant on you having bandwidth for you to use all your apps. Even when you've downloaded things to your laptop, you used to be able to do that, and somehow now you can't quite do that. And that's really frustrating if you're moving about a lot and you're moving through areas where you may or may not have bandwidth. But they've been designed for a very different view of what work is, of someone sitting at a desk in a place where they have always on bandwidth. You have informal versus informal labor markets and human-centered versus automation. So one of the things that we've seen in our work here is that work is really relationship-based on the continent, whereas a lot of the dialogue in the global north is about how do you automate work? How do you move the people out of the work, as opposed to thinking about how can you support the people who are doing the work? And then generative AI introduces new complexities. So data and decisions on model design and training don't tend to reflect the social and cultural realities of populations who aren't in that training data. So they're not populations who are majority populations on the web, which is where most of the data comes from. And this exacerbates the inequities, the misalignments, and the stereotypes of the internet, and has widespread implications for the usefulness of AI. So whole continents and their knowledge are severely underrepresented, and this comes through clearly in use. As you do build on your laptop, your page down doesn't seem to work. Let's build. Oops. Oh, so if I click on there. That arrow, brilliant, thank you. Okay, it's all right, you can leave it, it's fine, thank you, thanks Millicent. Sorry, using other people's laptops always fun. So this is something, the languages part, I think everyone in this room will know, that's why you're here. There's over 7,000 languages spoken in the world, but most models are trained on about 100 of them. And then even the supported languages have poorer performance than English. If you look at this graph here, the only African language is Arabic, which is 1% of the training data. And this is text as well. It can get even worse when we start thinking about speech. And then as well as languages, culture tends to be excluded. So we work with small businesses in Nigeria and Kenya who are using all types of generative AI, and they found that it was really Americanized. And they all had problems. All of their problems were when they were doing work facing the African continent. They were enjoying using these tools. They felt they were useful, but we said, where are you having problems? And every single problem surfaced was about content that was African facing, which of course, if you're a small business in Africa, most of your work is African facing. So as the CEO said, most of these tools don't have African voices, African perspectives, or African names. And then this is one that I find particularly shocking. The lawyer, even if you put into it that you're asking from a Kenyan perspective, while in Kenya, does this law applies? They'll reference people in the US who were talking about that law in Kenya, which is insane because we have Kenyan authors. We've done the actual work. And this is something that's common to places all over the world which are not largely represented on the internet. So we know that AI has a language problem, but just as importantly, AI has a knowledge problem. And so if we want to build AI that works for everybody, we need a shift towards more human-centered AI, which requires deeply multidisciplinary research. And basically, this involves including a much, much wider range of voices in AI development, attacking the problem from different angles. So you need human-centered people on your AI team, but you also need your AI team to get out into the real world and see what the people that they're designing for are actually doing with their models. And this is even if you're developing like a speech model, go out and see, ask some people to talk into your speech model. We did it. Our models didn't perform quite as well as we hoped we'd seen on the benchmarks, and we've been doing a lot of work to improve that. And then you have to address the inherent problems in the underlying models. It's no good improving the user interface. That's an important part of it, but that's not going to impact the results you get if the models are poor. So we ground our research in real use cases, and we tackle the hardest cases first because that's where we believe that the innovation will lie. And I'm going to give you a very brief overview of Project Gecko because that's where we've been doing a lot of our speech work. So this is a AI for smallholder farmers. The challenge is erratic weather from climate change is making farming increasingly precarious. We've partnered with Digital Green, who helps smallholder farmers engage in sustainable farming practices. And they've been working for 17 years, so pre this lot of AI, with farmers and have had a lot of success. And then a couple of years ago, they released Farmer Chat, which is an AI assistant for farmers. However, they also have a video library of 7,000, more than 7,000 videos created by farmers for farmers in their local languages, talking about sustainable farming practice. And so we partner with them to help them unlock that video data and produce it as answers. So if you, a farmer, asks in Kikuyu a question, you want to return the video snippet in Kikuyu that answers that question. And one of the things actually that we learned after going into the field is a Kikuyu speaking farmer might ask in English through typing. But if you're going to return a video answer, you want to return a Kikuyu video answer, but English written text. So there's a really interesting multilingual environment. So we are innovating in a number of spaces: speech models, small language models, the multimodality, can you do Q&A on video data to answer questions, and developing new human-centered AI practices. And so Project Gecko is an ongoing journey at the intersection of machine learning and human-computer interaction. And we have our multidisciplinary team, which I've talked about. But one of the things we've been doing is conducting iterative rounds of field work and design, and then model training as well. So we went out into the field to understand what farmers wanted and needed. Then we did some work building some models so we could ingest these videos into the pipeline so we could return the right answer. But then we went out and took those models into the field and got real farmers to talk to those models and see what happens. So you can understand, you know, you've got your performance on benchmark and you've got your performance in real life. And so, Millicent, do I have enough time to do the video or should I skip the video? It's going to start. Sorry. Oh, let me just go to that. Oops, there we go. Okay, and so my final slide is I just want to talk about the speech pipeline that we recently released, which is called PASA. So this is the result of our work for Kenyan languages and thinking about speech technology. So it's been about co-creating speech technologies in partnerships with communities. We produced PASA Bench, which is the first low resource language ASR leaderboard, starting with 39 African languages. So if you're going to build speech technology for your language or a set of languages, you can look them up and it will tell you which of the open source models already performs best on your language. So that's a good one to start with to do the training. We have some ASR models in 6 Kenyan languages, which outperform some of the main models. And then we have playbooks for AI deployments in low resource settings. So this is like distilling our learnings that we've had from working with farmers and working in the field. For example, how much data do you need to fine tune a model? Is it best to have domain specific data or general data? The answer is a mix. General data to a certain point, then domain specific data. After that is where you get the improvements. So you can use that QR code and see our models. And with that, thank you.
Thanks very much, Jackie, for wonderful opening remarks. I'll just bring these other slides up. One second. Oops. Okay, yeah. So we'll move straight to our keynote talk. This is going to be delivered online by Professor Vukosi. So Professor Vukosi is director of the African Institute of Data Science and AI, ABSA chair of Data Science and professor of Computer Science at the University of Pretoria, where he leads the Data Science for Social Impact Group. His research focuses on machine learning, AI, NLP, particularly for African and other low resource languages. He's the founder of Lelapa AI, the Masakane Research Foundation, Deep Learning in Daba. His work spans social challenges in science, energy, public safety, and utilities, aiming to create AI for Africans by Africans. Because he's a member of the independent scientific panel for AI for the UN and a member of the African AI Council at Smart Africa. Let's appreciate Vukosi as we put his slides up.
Okay, thank you. How much time do I have, Millicent?
I have 30 minutes. Am I right, Stan?
Okay, okay, okay. I will try my best here.
Thank you, Prof.
Okay, cool. Sorry, I couldn't be in Nairobi. It's a very weird year. I have not yet made it to Nairobi even once this year, which is not normal. And it would have been great to be in the room and visiting MSR again in Westlands. Okay, I'll give a quick talk. I've been, this is my sabbatical year talk. So I'm on sabbatical this year, which means I'm just more working on research and less teaching and building up a new institute in this space. And as was said, I have many hats in looking at artificial intelligence across the continent, but mostly is to try to bring things together. I was at Deep Learning Indaba as a trustee and one of the co-founders, and right now spent the last few weeks at the UN scientific panel. I run the Data Science for Social Impact Group, which has had also alumni that come out of Nairobi in different places, and I hope also continuing to work also with MSR in different things. So as I kick off, I think a message that should keep us going, and thanks also for Girmaw and Jackie for the remarks also at the beginning, and I do talk to them a bit, is really on this, like, I think VUCA Africa, African AI is not going to build itself in all those different African languages. It just says, hey, we should wake up and do the needful, what we need to do in these spaces. For me, sure, we can always put up these different self-labels, but I'm an African researcher who works on making language and infrastructure for all of us. And as Jackie said, also probably a lot of people on this are both in physically and online are trying to do this. But my personal mission is then to make sure that we have agency during these ongoing AI revolutions. Sorry. Yeah. Okay. So what are these revolutions? So we've had these uneven gains of this LLM revolution. And one way that can explain this is just thinking about our indigenous languages, that we see graphs like this and we see like, oh man, we're like, almost GPT-6. But when we use a heuristic, like, how much textual data you might have per language, on Wikipedia, you have about 7 million in English. Egyptian Arabic is 1.6, and that number just quickly goes down, where Swahili is 80,000, isiZulu is 11,000, and Sesotho is like only 1,000. So it shows you, like, with your big LLMs, with all their faults and problems, in English, they still have a lot of data, and for the indigenous languages, this is very small. So what have we been doing at UP? Sure. How do you work with the small amounts of data? One, you could do things like augmentation. So we explored for a while, looking at augmentation as a way to deal with these low resource scenarios. And we have a library that you can use for this. And we've also then worked to also join global initiatives in this space of improving the amount of available tools to do augmentation as well. On another side is that people do not necessarily speak very like, in a pure language way. We tend to think about code mixing and code switching across the African continent with 2,000 plus languages. And as such, doing work around code mixing and code switching is important. And this is work covered that is led by Dr. Olaleye or Kayode, who was a postdoc in our lab for a while, and then also Michelle, who's graduating with a PhD in this next month, also working on code mixing and code switching. The other side, to add to PASA being available and the benchmark as well. On our side, we were part of a big collaboration across, more than 5 countries. But then on our side, we looked at the Next Voices project in terms of South Africa, where we created 3,000 hours of speech. Paper is currently under review, but you can find the preprint on archive kind of as well. But there was a team out of Kenya, there was a team out of Mali, team out of Nigeria, and then also Rwanda, and I think total is about 18,000 hours of speech data that has just become available. And it's been great seeing also what MSR, Google, and a couple of people with another 12,000 hours. So for people who are working on speech, you now have about 30,000 hours of African language speech. It's a fraction of languages across the continent, but it's also very interesting to see how the different ways that people were collecting data and the challenges that it also brings. So there's no perfect here. We're just trying to see how does this work? And there's so much more that our group has been doing in these spaces. The other side is protecting data and protecting people. So some work to highlight from University of Pretoria is from the Data Science Law Lab, and more nearer to you there who are in Nairobi at CIPIT, where a new license called the Nulata Obodo Open Data License that more tries to tackle some of these challenges that data is not being kind of more available because about thinking about equitable licensing where the benefits of what gets done with the data also accrue to the communities that actually create these data. So this is a very important thing. My other hat, I am a co-founder of an AI company called Lelapa AI, and we work on language as well. And we also have another license called Esetu that is also trying, there's differences and similarities, but you can go read the 2 licenses and then choose kind of which one you would want to go with in this area. Another part in connecting to Jackie's remarks is thinking about how do we do best practice and learn. So Dr. Chidi has been leading a project supported through data.org and part of AI4D and then also Masakane research lab here on thinking about how we do work, how we do research, and how this might impact communities and how they participate with us. So the first version of the playbook is out. You can get access to this. I will put the link in the chat for people, but then for those who are in the room, you might just scan the QR code on just thinking about digitization of data for these spaces. And I wanted just to jump to the end on our section. We go in and say, for African languages, strong technical progress. But one of the things is that community engagements improves data quality, cultural relevance, and ethical legitimacy. But then participation tends to be under prioritized in our work. And that's a problem. Why? If we want that, we need to make sure it's designed into our processes, it's resourced, and then we think about sustainability. If we don't do that, we become extractive. And as such, these models will limit the long-term impact. If we're worried about the 2,000 to 3,000 languages and the cultures and the geographies that they represent, by not being participatory and really bringing people in, there's a high likelihood that these things are going to fail in the long term. And we need to kind of think about this. We are working on the second part of this playbook, which will then cover things like small language models. So I'm very excited about what happens in these next few months as we work through this process. Why do we do this? I refer to this quote by Gustav Mahler. It says that tradition is not the worship of ashes, but then we want to preserve these fires, right? We want to keep going and then building up our languages and cultures in different kind of ways. As such, my keynote, I really wanted to focus on evaluation. So at some parts, if I think about the history of indigenous language, natural language processing, especially over the last decade or so across maybe the continent and beyond, was building data, bringing in people to work then on building models with their data. And we're hitting these plateaus that, progress is kind of stalling in different ways. And it's sure, do we have the compute? Sure, do you have the human resources to do all of this research? But I believe one of the things is then also, are we doing evaluations in the right ways? So why is this important? One benchmark, and I know I've seen the different people who are on this in this call in the room. There's many benchmarks, but I wanted to highlight Afrobench because one of the things it highlighted was just this. If you compare with in Afrobench, where you're looking at large language models across African language evaluations. Sure, here you can look at GPT-4o, let's say scores around 58, 59 across these different tasks. But if you do have more models that are actually built for African languages, and I know no benchmark will be complete and necessarily this is the best they could do. I would also do suggest you go look at Puzzlebench. I really like the work that was done on that. You can see you can actually improve this performance. And this is very important because then it says if people take care, work really on the languages that they care about, you can make a difference. You don't need to be powerless in these cases. But if we think about benchmarks in general, still little or no support for African languages. There's pockets of excellence there, but we need to do something. There is also challenges, and this is one I wanted to highlight, in that even if there are benchmarks, sometimes these benchmarks are misleading. So in this work led by Idris Abdulmumin, what they did was they looked at Flores, which is a data set that is used a lot in machine translation evaluation, but then now covering many languages. And what they identified is that they're bringing in native speakers who were part of the lab or collaborators. They looked at the examples of the parallel sentences, and they found that a number of them were wrong, meaning they were just not correct. And as such, then they work to fix it. And this is a challenge also that faces a lot of indigenous language data and benchmarks, in that if there's automated work that then doesn't get actually validated very well, you might then have people showing results for benchmarks that actually are wrong. So now it ends up almost being like the model that is being trained is learning how to better create the errors that then will lead it to do better in a benchmark, if you understand what I mean. So that's a weird kind of thing, and we don't want that. And even then, in thinking about the history and a march forward of natural language processing, we're really still talking about in English. So LLMs are surging, but African languages are still left behind in this case, and they are also redefining a lot of ACL work or NLP work, right? All right. So we have to measure, and we have to measure better. This then connects to this work led also by a couple of people on our side, being led by Dr. Idris also as well, of looking at the last 2 decades of work in natural language processing across African language continent. And in this work, yes, they use an automated way to identify papers, filter, annotate, and then verify these with human agreement. And through that, what they show, for example, is that you've now gone from 400 publications to now 2,000 contributions. And you can see when I talk about that plateau is when we start hitting this section, you have to then ask yourself what's kind of going on. So this paper is obviously also in the environment that there's other papers, for example, by David Adelani and team, looking also at the progress over, I think, a 10-year period. And with this one, you can see also the themes that are being covered. Yeah, this is from Jesse Joba, sorry, and a couple of people from Saarland. And you can then see also the work that they cover and say, there's been amazing progress, but we need more, almost 100x more to really get to the levels that we that we want. On the other side, if we then look at evaluations, this is a paper, I think, from other MSR colleagues in MSR India. I'm just talking more in the context of people being in MSR Nairobi, that I think I think it's 3 weeks ago, maybe, or a few weeks ago, this became available in terms of preprint, where you look at evaluation of multilingual benchmarks. And when they now were evaluating the evaluations themselves, one of the things they highlight, for example, is that if you use the categorization from Joshi et al., which is a paper that just looks at multilingual and the state of like the multilingual, I mean, multiple languages, where they categorize as winners all the way down to left behinds. What you see is that from the winners, you kind of have a diversity of different types of tasks that are covered in evaluations. But then once you get to languages that are left behind or scraping by, you have a concentration of maybe having evaluations for translations and evaluations for like sentiment analysis or classification, not as diverse. So even when you do see benchmarks that then say, hey, we're now doing better in this, like, multilingual benchmark for the more indigenous or low resource languages, it is likely that it's more covering things like translation, less that it's looking at coding in that language or math or things like. So it's very important to understand this when you're looking at these models. The other side is the limitations of these evaluations becoming available. In this other work from this eval coalition, they show things like saturation. So one, the more popular a benchmark becomes, the less useful it becomes because it gets saturated, and there's not much information that is now given, like, available given that benchmark results, because it basically, the top models in that benchmark become less informational. And the same thing is, the longer the benchmark has been out, the less useful it becomes, saturated more, and the less useful it becomes. So the more that benchmark gets cited, or the longer that benchmark has been available, the higher likelihood that it's going to be saturated. And then this does then have implications for thinking about multilingual evaluations as well. So this concept comes back, which I've been talking about for a couple of years, that now low resource languages then face this high interest credit card situation, where you want to resolve the issues and it seems like it's insurmountable. And if you don't do it, it becomes more costly. It means it will cost you more to do it later, right? So it's just like having a high interest credit card. The more you wait to pay the amount that you owe, the more expensive it actually becomes. So now the question that, or the point that to highlight is that then generative AI now, is it adding to the credit amount, how much you owe, or is it increasing the interest rate? That the more, even now, it becomes even more expensive the more you wait to resolve some of these challenges. The other thing is then, which I've added for this year, is the diverse evaluation that is actually needed in this area. Again, piggybacking on Jackie's remarks, is it too much of a cost to bear? That we just say, like, I don't want to do more participatory work, more participatory evaluation, and you will have to do it. But then now it becomes more expensive because the more we wait on it, the more then it becomes the low resource languages become more endangered, and now doing it actually becomes more expensive. So diversity, meaning that we want to put humans in the loop. So in my last couple of minutes, it's then to say, okay, fine. We then have to go in and say, like, how do we then measure the measurements that are being used out there? So some ideas that I'm exploring, and a lot of other people are exploring, is to say, hey, how do we use techniques also that might be based in machine learning to reduce maybe how many evaluations you must do, but then from that you kind of keep track of the full cost. So the full cost is still low. So things like active learning, where you want to choose that when you choose what gets labeled by human, it's something that gives you information in the learning, in the training of your model. So in, for example, this work by Bonner and team out of Miller, they look and say, like, hey, we can do this and we can reduce the acquisition costs in these areas. So what they want to do, or what we all want to do, is we want to solve the issue of annotation scarcity paradox, right? So for the data set, for the languages that need the most work, it's more expensive to get per label or per annotator to work with you, right? So we need humans most where we have the least data, but the current kind of way of doing volume first of huge data and benchmarks makes then human involvement very expensive, right? And access then to people to help or work with for different languages is also uneven. So again, for the languages that you really want to do work in, you don't have that many people. So the idea then is, how do you reduce this cost by reducing the number of interactions that are actually needed on the side? But then the other way to think about it, and not to think about it that, oh, we're trying to like remove the humans out of the loop. It's just to say you want that for the information places that you're going to have the interactions, they are the most useful in many different ways. So even for the people, the experts that you want to bring into the room, that it's really the most interesting questions that are being used. The other one in terms of benchmarks is, like, when we use benchmarks, they're not just data sets, but they're instruments for looking at ability, but then who validates them? And hopefully from the previous few slides, I've highlighted that we still have challenges in these areas, and there's exclusion of low resource languages. So one kind of set of work that's been going in this area is things like item response theory. Why is it important? Is you want to estimate the item difficulty and model ability. So IRT comes out of psychometrics, or how standards-based testing of students comes in, where you evaluate the students versus the questions that they're given, and you identify which questions actually are information, that they can discriminate between very good students and then average students and students who are bad. Instead of having students, the humans, you can now evaluate the models in the same way. So if you look at tiny benchmarks, this paper, they show that you can take a evaluation data set and reduce it to like a fraction of it. And the examples or the tests that I use, or the samples that I use, are actually the ones that are informational. And you don't need to, like, for example, you can go from 1,000 samples in evaluation, while with a tiny benchmark, it could be 50. And those 50 still give you the same discriminative power as having 1,000 examples, because of those other 950 examples, they actually aren't giving you much information or discriminating between models. I will skip this, but then you can kind of go look at this tutorial from EACL 2024 on IRT, and there's different ways. So as I said, you try to estimate the probability of a model getting some question right, so some sample right, and the estimate is based on the ability. So in typical IRT, this is a human who's being evaluated, but in this case, it's a model for our model. And then the difficulty is how difficult is that problem, and then what is then the discrimination kind of curve that you want, and what you want to estimate. This is a 2-parameter model. You want to estimate both the ability of the models and the difficulty per sample or per question. And this is interesting. Why is this important for participation? We can now think about value not just being for the NLP researcher. So with the item difficulty, sure, which prompts are hard. For linguists, it's also what's interesting from linguistics that is coming out. The discrimination, what should be noise and should not be there. And then again, what are these things that are very interesting to capture maybe cultural indicators, fluency or alignment, right? And some of the work I'm doing this year, I've seen, like when doing some work on Setswana benchmarks, for example, is there's things that are consistently difficult. There's some things that are not informational. And then you also capture maybe unseen errors during the annotation that now show up as you're doing this analysis from this lens. So IRT show will tell us what's difficult, what models consistently fail, but then to understand really why that difficulty exists, you will understand. You need the linguists, the speakers, the annotators, and community knowledge. Right? So thinking. Somebody's not muted. Okay. Hopefully that's better. So yeah, I'm almost done. So are models failing because of ambiguity or something doesn't fit well in that language? Right. And as such, I'm very much like maybe coming to this from a different way of advocating a lot of human in the loop in this area, because we can then do better in this area. So we can be focused more where it matters most. And as such, we can then design with communities. It's just that I'm running out of time. I'm sorry. I will skip here. And it then becomes this, like, please, when now you're looking at something like MMLU, these gives you a very different way of thinking about these type of benchmarks and say like, what, like, this is very narrow. Like we're narrowing ourselves by using these massive benchmarks, and because it makes it feel like we're having progress, but then it's actually in a very narrow view where we flatten language, we flatten culture, and we're not actually seeing everything. On my side, I do have a paper that's currently under review. I'm hoping to upload it soon onto archive when I get a minute, and I can do that. That just looks back as this part of what happened in between us having this explosion of data creation, participatory work happening, and why we might be then plateauing at the moment. And then in terms of my sabbatical, I'm hoping to be in Nyeri, Kenya in June, Toronto and Montreal in Canada in July, Lagos in August, and Singapore and Shanghai in September, October, so people can reach out in terms of trying to see if you can steal a few minutes of my time and talk about these things. And then at the same time, at the University of Pretoria, we are also hosting the AI for the African Languages Lab. And this lab looks at some of these challenges. And we just had a workshop that's available on our YouTube, where you can see some of these discussions that are going into these spaces. Thanks to all of our collaborators we work with, and we still have to do better. Always have to do better. And thanks also to the people who fund our research, including MSR, who do support the work that we do. So thank you. I will stop there for now, if there's one or two questions that might come up.
Thank you very much, Vukosi. Quite insightful keynote there. We can take one quick question for Professor. We have one quick question for Professor Vukosi. Else we can move to the next. Oh, we have a question on the chat.
Yeah, I think there's a question online as well. Somebody's raised their hand.
Oh, okay. Please unmute and then just ask your question.
Okay, good afternoon. Am I audible? Can everyone
Yes.
hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Prof, I was listening to a lot of what you are saying, and it just makes me reckon back to one of the projects I've been working on, which was trying to fine-tune a text model on about 3 million Nigerian languages, Igbo, Hausa, Yoruba, and I faced very severe difficulty in the sense that even after gathering all the data and fine-tuning the model over 30 hours, it still performed really badly. And I know that data machine learning research and data science is a lot of iteration, but it just feels kind of without direction. Where do I start? How do I know, okay, what methodology can I use to make this model better?
Okay, sure. So that would be an answer for that. So there's parts about like what it depends, like, if you're doing 30 hours, where do those 30 hours come from? There's a lot of work on trying to figure out, and I think Jackie made, in terms of the PASA team, also referred to this. I couldn't put it into these slides given the time. Was trying to figure out what's the minimum amount of hours required per language necessarily. For some people who have like almost unlimited GPUs, tens of thousands of engineers, we are hearing these magical numbers of 10 hours might be enough for a language to get some kind of good enough ASR. But when for some people, it might be 100. And then there might also then be saturation again once you get to 300, 400 hours per language in these spaces. So this is something that is still being explored. It's an active area. So even if you're getting negative results, it's worthwhile sharing with people, kind of explaining what your data process was, what what you created, it might just be that for some specific things, your data set is very good for that with the training models that are out there. In some, it might work well if you're using a pre-trained system and not training from scratch, and then adding that language. But then for some, so this is all the kind of realm of possibilities that could be kind of out there. Obviously, with Next Voices, I think there is the 3,000 hours of Nigerian speech that's available. I don't know if all of it now is easily downloadable, but it's there. And then also out of Washal, the Google data is also there. And I think I did see another one yesterday or 2 days ago, another 120 hours. So it's a very, very amazing time to try out and then be able to answer some of these questions.
Yeah, let's appreciate Professor Vukosi one more time.
Yes, and I'm sorry I can't stay for everything at the moment, but I'll try to listen in and as the day goes on.
Thank you for even being here on your sabbatical. Thank you. Okay, so we will move to our next speaker, Tavonga Siyavora, and he's going to speak about building the substrates, the foundry model for African AI innovation. So Tavonga is a results-driven technologist with a strong track record in advancing product strategy and translating research into real-world impact. As Senior Program Manager at Google Research, he is part of the team behind the large-scale speech and language initiative WAXAL, drawing on experience across agtech and adjacent sectors. He focuses on advancing AI-powered solutions through collaboration, partnerships, and team leadership. So his background spans hardware, software engineering, as well as deal scoping, partner negotiation, and cross-functional delivery. He's known for aligning innovation with practical outcomes, ensuring solutions that are grounded in real-world needs and drive meaningful impact. Let's appreciate Tavonga's. I'll just pull his slides.
Thank you. Good afternoon to all. As mentioned, my name is Tavonga Siyavora. It's an honor to be here. So, yes, my badge is different from the sign on the front of the door here. But when it comes to the African substrate, if you will, we are all trying to cultivate the same soil, right? And this is a pretty big field. So many congratulations on the recent PASA launch for the Microsoft team. Dr. Vukosi, really excited about the work that's happening there. Language and culture is a pretty precious thing, right? So as mentioned, my name is Tavonga. I come from Zimbabwe, and in Zimbabwe we have what we call Chidawo, right? Think of it as your heritage, right? And within our heritage and our heritage symbol of Zhou, which is the elephant, we have different branches, right? I remember when I was a kid, my grandmother used to call me Va Mija, right? And within Mija, it was people that were known from a certain area to be skillsmen and people that were very good at one particular area of skill. In this case, it was Mija Zaipisama Tombo, right, which means smelters of iron ore. So all of that being said, my team is tired of my coming up with foundry analogies this month. I'm going to give you guys one more today as we work through this talk. So in metallurgy, a foundry is when you forge base materials, right? Think of steel, iron, and those are built towards the finished goods. Often the AI conversation within Africa is focused around the end product or applications. I am a product manager, so it's easy to try and see what that end game is, but it's important to also take a breath and think about enablement along the way. So for today's conversation, thinking through more of a foundry model, right, that I'll try and shape some of the Google Research's team contributions around. So with that, we're forging, the high quality data sets the standards and evals that allow builders and researchers in the room and online to leapfrog the barriers of compute and data scarcity that we all know are real for the African ecosystem, right? So kind of thinking of this as a seed foundry. So in the interest of time, I know Millicent is watching me closely. For folks that might have questions, please populate them into chat, and I'll try and answer questions after my talk here to try and help us catch up on the scheduled agenda. All right, well, I guess the slide is going to, there we go. I'll have to account for that delay. All right, so for the Google Research Africa team, we are part of a larger global body. And of our team, we have researchers and engineers working across the continent, complementing each other across these various projects, right? And of our Africa team, we have a lab here in Nairobi and also in Accra, Ghana. And we're part of a broader network where we are trying to ensure that proximity further improves and harnesses how we define the actual problem, all right? So if you're a researcher in Lagos or a builder in Johannesburg, you're part of this ecosystem, right? And we aren't just building for the continent, we're building with it, ensuring that our work is scientifically grounded.
And it passed. 132 people said yes. Okay, there's nothing weird about this. Well, what?
All right, someone needs to go on mute. Thank you. We'll catch up on your podcast later. All right, and then for my team at large, so our team's mission isn't just abstract CS research. It's about realizing societal impact through scientific breakthroughs. I definitely resonate with some of the framing that Girmaw shared earlier. And in our work, we strive to advance the African research ecosystem, so unblocking breakthroughs that the global north might overlook, and collaborating with partners to deploy real-world solutions. So through this foundry lens that I'm using today, this global research enablement lens meets community-led engineering, right? And then we help to provide that catalytic layer where we can seed those materials to de-risk people's work. So taking a look at the hard numbers, I'll have a lot of QR codes today, so feel free to have the phone ready. But I did find this paper a good read from last year. And if we start to think about some of the hard numbers, often we do hear about low resource languages, but as researchers, we know that this can be a euphemism at times when the reality can also be a representation gap, right? So two things that stood out to me here are first, 88% of the world's 88% of Africa's 2,000 languages are effectively not represented in any global NLP research databases out there, right? So think of Archive, IEEE, right? So if you're a builder today trying to use a standard library for a mother tongue, you're more often likely to get a null result on the end of it. Even more stark is the research disparity, where there is a 70x disparity in the computational linguistic publications that are associated with the global top 10 languages versus those with the top 10 African languages, right? This isn't a lack of talent, it's a lack of the actual substrate, right? So with this foundry approach, we're thinking about how to close that gap by creating the data building blocks that help to address this. So as I lean into this foundry analogy for today, how do we think about beginning to address this from a systematic standpoint, right? And I'm thinking about it through 4 different layers. So there's first standardization, and here I'll talk about creating an actual vocabulary for AI in local languages. Second would be modality, right? So there's text, but we also know that speech is how you can connect with majority of African users. So we'll elaborate more on the Wahal work coming out of the Google team. Third would be around safety. And here it's ensuring that models don't just speak the language, but also respect the culture behind it. And finally, and kind of building on Dr. Vukosi's comments earlier, look at evals, right? And how can we move past what can at times be Western heavy benchmarks to ensure that we are locally relevant also. So today I'm going to be diving into some specific examples about the work that we're doing across these four different layers, and ultimately it's helping to provide that seed foundry for the ecosystem. Before I talk about building models, right, there's talk about the actual words that we use, right? And if we think about words like artificial intelligence, chatbot, deepfake, right, for the global research audience, these have clear meanings. But for hundreds of, if not millions, of Africans, these words simply don't exist in their native languages or tongues. So this terminology gap actually drove a lot of the work around the AI glossary, which is helping to address that fundamental barrier of standardized terms and hindering the understanding and adoption within communities. So take Swahili, for example, over 200 million people speak, right? Before this project, there wasn't officially an agreed upon way to say artificial intelligence, right? And if you can't name that technology, then it makes it challenging to draft an actual policy, right? It makes it difficult to build curriculum around it. It makes it difficult to communicate some of the risks and hazards to the broader community when it comes to using these technologies, right? So in addressing this problem, that's where the AI glossary effort came from. So rather than building kind of living language, our process was kind of built into three different phases. First, create, deliberate, and then circulate. So to create, we came up with 100 of what we felt were the most essential AI terms and definitions. Second was deliberation. So this was working with the actual community, and we held intensive workshops to actually bring together linguists, AI experts, and official language boards. So for Swahili, for example, this was folks from about 5 different African countries coming together in the same room to actually deliberate and find agreement on these different terms, and then finally circulate. Right. So as shared on the QR code here, this is currently available within GitHub, and the intent is that for the community at large, folks are able to fork and continue building on this work. Now, this work wasn't done in a vacuum, right? The scale of this foundational vocabulary is massive, but there's a lot of runway left. So the first release, like I mentioned, was Swahili, Zulu, Xhosa, and Afrikaans. We are looking at other representative languages from West Africa and also other parts of the continent. But involved in this first effort were organizations like the Pan-South African Language Board, the East African Kiswahili Commission, and UNESCO. So this is what I mean by making contributions to that substrate in the spirit of a digital commons, right? And as mentioned, this is currently available out on GitHub, so folks feel free to go out and take a look. Now let's move to the next layer. And if we think about modality, right, this is where the Wahal effort came from. The word Wahal comes from the language Wolof, and it means to speak. It was more than just a name, it's more of a directive, right? So starting at the beginning, we knew it wasn't going to be a quick win. So the Wahal release that came out in February of this year actually began back in 2021, right? And it was a long road towards productization. And the intentionality was for this to be community-led. So we partnered with organizations like Makerere University and institutions like the University of Ghana, AIMS of Senegal, Digital Uganda, among others. In all, there was over 7,000 contributors across 26 different countries that helped to realize that low resource is a data access problem and not a talent problem, like I mentioned earlier. So as researchers, it's important to be realistic about what this is. So I do want to ensure that I frame correctly, right? So here we captured over 1,800 hours of transcribed speech across 31 languages now. And the intent is for this to be a living repository. So we are actively working on gathering more languages also. Now, if we say that a given language has about 60 hours of recordings, that isn't enough to pre-train a foundation model, right, from scratch. So the intent here is that WAHAL is kind of a seed foundry, right? So it's kind of that catalytic layer that allows global models to finally hear African voices through fine-tuning and LoRa, right? So think of the data set that way. And following our release in February of this year, I'm super excited to see all of the engagement feedback that we've had from startups and the community at large, now currently over 37,000 downloads. So to get into some of the technical bottlenecks that the team worked through for this work, first, traditional ASR data is more read speech, right? Think of your evening newscaster, right? And typically done in a booth. But this begins to fail as soon as a researcher's efforts are, say, put out in the streets in the middle of Nairobi here, and you have all of the real world sounds that complements the actual speaker's efforts, right? So our Foundry solution here was more image prompted elicitation, right? So we showed participants topics from the Google Open Images dataset. So we showed them the image and then asked them to, in a natural way, speak to what they were seeing, right? And the result is that this data set captures a lot of the ums and ahs and some of the natural pauses of real human conversation. And we wanted to capture a lot of this acoustic reality because that's the best way for folks to actually build these models. So this is an approach that the team was quite proud of. Next, I'll talk about TTS, right? So while ASR needs messy reality, TTS requires absolute acoustic purity. So to achieve this, we co-design custom studios or recording boxes with partners, and builders and community members worked in pairs, drafting scripts for up to 20,000 words. And in these pairs, there would be alternation between the reader and the recorder. And the drafting of those scripts led to about 10 to 20,000 words that they brought themselves. We now have over 565 hours of the TTS high fidelity data, and the intent, as mentioned earlier, is to continue building on this. Now, from the onset, the intent was for this to be community-led and also available to the community at large. So this is all on Hugging Face under CC BY 4 license. So open license for folks to take further and also iterate. And again, this is another contribution towards that broader Foundry model that I spoke to earlier. Okay, layer 3 is around safety. All right, so for many builders out there, safety is seen as a post-processing filter, something that you bolt on at the end. In the Foundry model, safety is more of a structural requirement, right? And it's almost part of that substrate itself. So global safety guardrails are often culturally blind. So to approach this, you need to account for things that might, you can catch a slur in English, right? But then miss a dangerous medical myth in Wolof, right? Or a sensitive historical trigger in Amharic, right? So for this, the Amplify initiative was created to ensure moral sovereignty around this, right? So not just creating censoring for models, but more red teaming against the actual cultural and logistical realities of the continent, right? So working towards models that are more wise than they are sanitized. I need to trademark that. All right, so this wasn't just a simple data labeling exercise. With this, we engaged about 155 different local domain experts. I'm talking physicians, lawyers, human rights activists. And it was important that we bring in professionals, primarily because they understand the high stakes and nuances that are associated with localized misinformation, right? And from this effort, they generated over 8,000 annotated adversarial queries across 7 major languages. So this is Arabic, Amharic, Hausa, Igbo, Swahili, Wolof, and Yoruba. And coming out of this effort, so some of the key takeaways were that, many of these global models often handle syntax perfectly, but fail when it comes to that cultural alignment, right? That's really what drove this work. So by building this safety substrate, open source data set that's available on GitHub, we're trying to ensure that the ecosystem continues to build and that they're aren't just getting a tool that's smart, but also one that's wise to local context. The final layer that I'll be speaking to is around evals, right? So the Foundry isn't just about raw materials. It's also about ensuring that you have quality outputs on the other end of it too. And with this, I'll be talking about the AfriMed QA, where some of our team have started the work here, but the work continues. So as researchers, and I've spoken to by Dr. Vukosi earlier, we know that if your eval metric is misaligned, right, with your development environment, then your model will surely fail. So using Western benchmarks like the USMLE, which is the United States Medical Licensing Examination, right, in an African medical context, is likely testing, like testing a desert vehicle on like a, ice glacier, right? You're probably not going to do well. So we needed a benchmark that evaluated models against the logistical, cultural, and clinical realities of the continent. So if a model suggests an MRI, right, in a rural clinic that doesn't have power, right, it's more of a hallucination of resource, and it's important that we actually catch that. So that's what drove this work. So to build this, we formed a massive consortium. So to realize the needed scale here, crowdsourced about a little over 15,000 questions, making this the largest Pan-African medical benchmark that's been done to date. And for reach here, we partnered with about 60 medical schools and across 16 countries. Now, why does this matter, right? Because a doctor in Nigeria faces different infrastructure constraints and like disease burdens than a doctor in South Africa would, right? And we need to capture that diversity. And for precision here, we didn't stop at just general medicine, right? So we covered 32 different specialties, right? And what we found was a precision gap, right? So models that were great at general health often fell short when it came to questions about obstetrics or surgery, right? Needed to get that local context. And for realized impact, I'm really proud of fellow team members that drove this work, and it was realized as the best social impact award at the Association for Computational Linguistics last year, and has already been used to train specialized models like Google's MedGemma. So here's the most important finding for the builders in the room, right? So looking at the comparison between general LLMs and specialized models, we observed a reasoning paradox, right? You would expect a model like OpenBio LLM, which is specialized for medicine, to outperform. But in Africa, it consistently loses to higher parameter general LLMs that are given localized reasoning data, right? So if we start to think about why, right? So the theory is that specialized models are often overfit to Western medical logic, right? In this example, right? So they assume that you have an MRI in every building that someone is going to go to, and access to a specific list of expensive drugs that might not be available in that given market, right? When you strip away that context, those models fail empirically, right? And our conclusion is a derivative for everyone here building context-aware technologies, right? So you got your raw model scale, when coupled with localized reasoning data, will likely outperform some of those narrow English centric specializations. So with this example, didn't just build a medical model, it was more building an African medical reasoning path, if that makes sense. So yeah, this is some of the substrate kind of being forged by the work of the Google Research Africa team. Really appreciate the invite, appreciate being part of the community at large. And as mentioned, and unfortunately won't be able to field questions live, but please do pop them in the chat there, and I'll try to address them all. Thank you.
So next up, we have Dr. Tobi Olatunji speaking, and he works at Intron Inc. He's an Ibadan-trained physician turned machine learning scientist with a decade of experience in clinical natural language processing for healthcare. 3+ years ago, he founded Intron Health. It's the first automated real-time medical scribe that supports 300+ African accents and 20+ languages, saving overworked doctors 3+ hours per day. It's a co-pilot that accelerates documentation, cuts patient wait time, reduces errors, and accelerates the transition to digitized care. So Dr. Tobi, please welcome. We can have a round of applause for him. Yeah, if you could stop sharing as well, Melissa, thank you. And we'll give him a moment. If you're speaking, Tobi, you're muted. So do unmute yourself.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay, let's figure out video, and then hopefully this works. Does this work? Okay.
Wonderful. We can see you now.
Let's see if this helps. Okay. Can you
And
still
Tobi's
hear me
joining
now?
us all the way from West Coast. So thank you so much for waking up so early to make it to the seminar. We really appreciate it. And yes, you're audible.
Okay, great. It's almost 6 a.m. So forgive me if I sound unnatural or if I sound sleepy or something. I'll try my best to stay awake through the talk. All right, let me try to share my screen and get started. Too many screens, God help me. Okay, cool. Okay, let me know if you can see my screen.
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay, cool. Okay, to
Take
get
it away.
started.
Yes.
All right. Okay, cool. So I'll take a more like this talk will be more implementation focused. I mean, bridge like research and implementation, but I think we'll be sharing a lot of the experience we've had deploying AI across multiple countries. Just for background, we work today with what's happening. God help me. I don't even know what you guys are seeing now on the screen. We work today with a bunch of organizations across Africa. We have voice AI models deployed in 6 countries, working with startups, governments, enterprises within health and outside of health. Okay, I don't think that came through. Yeah, and so we work with countries in East Africa, West Africa, South Africa, doing different types of voice AI work, including medical scribes, call center transcription, and more recently deploying voice agents. And so we have sort of like a breadth of experience understanding problems like models face in real world scenarios, conversations across Africa. So I'll spend the next 10 or so minutes sharing about how we got here, and then hopefully leave some time at the end to take questions. Okay, let's start with that one. Just background. Let's see. This is slow, or it's just me? Okay, yeah. So background quickly. Like we said in the introduction, was originally a doctor many years ago, but has spent the last 10-ish years working in machine learning, specifically natural language processing, and more recently speech. Most of that work has been in healthcare, but more recently started to work outside of healthcare. Before starting Intron, I was a research scientist with AWS on the healthcare AI team in San Francisco, and just learned a lot about how to solve data scarcity. So I think the way this talk will go, I will share some of the problems we initially faced and how that led us to design like a research problem and build a data set, design some algorithm, solve that problem, and move to the next problem. And so every step of this journey, you'll see how that iterative process of going through deployment, observing problems, solving them, and then moving forward to the next step. When we started this, I think 4 or 5 years ago, one of the major problems we realized trying to build a medical scribe for hospitals. And just for context, say you're a doctor in Nairobi, you're seeing 50, 60 patients a day, and your hospital is doing a digital transformation, trying to move from just using paper to electronic medical records. You would, your hospital then hands you a laptop and says, okay, now that you have all these patients, just use the computer. And it sounds very nice. Everyone likes the idea, but when the actual work starts, doctors realize that it takes them quite a bit of time to type the same quality of notes. And if you're saying I'm seeing 60 patients every day, it means you're asking me to type about 60 pages of notes every single day, in addition to an already busy day. And so that becomes very impractical for many doctors. And even though they want to do it, they have to push back at some point because it's too much additional work there. A study we did in 2024, the average keyboard speed of clinicians across Africa is about 20 words per minute, compared with like 60, 70, 80 in other parts of the world. And so you have someone who's very slow on the keyboard. They spend their time looking for X, semicolon, and all that, and the whole day is gone. And so we were trying to solve this data entry problem and felt like voice would be a good alternative to bridge that gap and to make it easier for them to use the electronic software they had. But most of the original models we tried out, I think back then it was deep speech was like the major open source model. There was very few options. This was before Wave to Vec, honestly, our very first attempts, and all those models just did very, very, very badly with African accents, and not just medical speech, even general speech. It was very difficult to find any models that worked well. And not just that there was no model, there was also no data set to benchmark or to even evaluate models. So we would have to load a model, have someone actually use that model and determine if it was good or bad. And so we had to create the very first data set that was at scale for African accents. This was the AfriSpeech 200 data set. It was this was a 200-hour data set, which at the time was probably the largest thing that was available. But more importantly, it had 120 African accents. So we were able to get representation across Africa from different countries. I think 13 countries at the time, over 1,000 speakers, and just providing like a representation of the continent and providing feedback on how different models performed on African accent. And we showed through that ACL paper that many models collapse, and if you fine-tuned on diverse data, you get better performance on African accent. So that was just like step one. The natural next step, when we had a model that was doing pretty well on African accents, was trying to deploy it in a real world setting. And please forgive this AI generated images. You'll see some egregious things. So please don't faint, don't collapse when you see. So people with two hands, two left arms, 4 fingers. This is just the regular AI slop of our day. So please don't get scared. But we published this paper in 2023, saying that most ASR models butcher African names, and this was just to provide evidence about a problem that we have noticed across Africa. These models just did very badly, and we created a data set that was particularly we designed an algorithm to enrich data sets with African names, with named entities from across Africa. So person names, locations, and organizations. We used sort of like a data augmentation strategy to create this corpus and publish that, and of course fine-tune on this data set, then significantly improved the recognition of African names, and we were able to show that this is actually a scalable approach, and you're able to confer these abilities on your models. That was a pretty big breakthrough for us, because people were having to users were having to spend time correcting errors with names, and that's like an irritation that paying customers don't like. And since we are a for-profit company, we have to do good work for people to actually pay us. Of course, next obvious problem we faced was medical terminology, and now that we started to work outside healthcare, we do legal transcription. We work with courts, law firms. We work with call centers. We work with different verticals. We're having to take the same approach to extend the model's abilities into other domains. And so one of the very, very big problems we noticed, particularly in healthcare, was if you have a lab result or a drug dose, if a doctor said, for example, 500 milligrams of a drug, if the model said 50 milligrams or 5 or 5,000, that's a significant error. I mean, from an evaluation standpoint, that's a very tiny error. It's just 1 0 that's missing or added. But for the patient or in healthcare, that's like a life-threatening error. And so we published a paper in 2024, just documenting what we had observed and just the types of medical errors and how bad they were. And actually, this year we actually working on a new paper that doesn't just classify errors, but measures the severity of the errors, and saying like some errors are more unsafe or more dangerous or more harmful than others. And I think that's an important dimension to capture. And we don't see many people working on that sort of like severity type scale for speech recognition models right now. So I think there's still gaps here to fill, and this same issue translates even to like finance when someone says they want to transfer 5,000 shillings or 2,300 shillings, or they're saying their ID number, their account number, their phone number, but the model just misrecognizes those numbers, and so you find many costly mistakes because models are not trained particularly to understand African accents when they read numbers, and even from I mean I'm in the US. I've been here for maybe 10 years, and even when I get I call it an IVR, maybe my bank or something, and they ask me to say my phone number, say my name, those models still struggle to understand my accent. And I think that just shows how much how far we still need to go in making models that actually work for Africans. I think the other big problem we faced was just getting out of doing voice dictations, which was what we started with. So doctor sees a patient, and then they can, once the patient leaves the room, they can pick up a microphone or a headset and just say their notes. So that was voice dictation, single speaker dictation. And all of the problems I discussed before were just on single speaker data sets or use cases. We then started to do multi-speaker transcription. So you have a doctor and a patient in the room, they have this conversation, and you're trying to transcribe that conversation. And that presented a new set of problems, not just the fact that both speakers were they have different positions. They're facing the microphone from different directions, and so you lose that that advantage of someone speaking directly into a mic, and now you have two people speaking from different angles. You have background noise, you have nurses in the background, you have other patients, you have so many things going on. You have a fan or an AC, and so there's a lot more noise, and your models starts to get off track. I think there was a sample we had where there was a radio or a TV playing in the background, and the model was instead transcribing what the like broadcaster was saying versus what the main speaker was saying. So I think just all these crazy problems, we had to go back and create better data sets, work with our communities, create better algorithms. I think for the noise especially, we actually wrote a specific algorithm to create data that sort of like reproduced a lot of the noise that we saw in production, trained the models, and now discovered that if you actually were very deliberate about the data distribution you show models, these things, the improvement shows up in your models. We actually did a paper with the team at Google Health. I think that's this multicultural medical assistance paper, looking at actually how in conversational settings models behave differently in different countries. So we looked at speech data from the US, from the UK, and from Nigeria, and we're able to show that this same models that were noise robust, that were very good in the West, were very bad for Africa. I think the last speaker already talked about the work we did with Google with AfriMed QA. I think we were looking for we're asking the question which LMs will be best for post-processing, like and doing things like summarization. So let's say you get a conversation transcript that's accurate or decent. You want to convert that transcript into a medical note or a clinical note. What's the best LLM? And not just what's the best LLM, what's the best LLM in cardiology versus pediatrics versus dentistry, for example. And we discovered that even the speech models work differently across those specialties. So we didn't expect that one LM would be the best across all specialties. And so this was an exercise. It was going beyond just like a generic medical QA data set and stratifying it across many specialties and figuring out, okay, this is the best LM. Maybe this is the best small LM for this specialty. This is the best large LM, so that we could figure out what provides the best value to different types of users. And then, of course, all the work we had discussed so far has been in the domain of just accents, just English accents alone. So all those problems we faced in with English accents, we as we started to do more conversation transcriptions, we started to encounter like multilingual speech. And so maybe patients and doctors, I think I was in a hospital in Uganda, and the doctor and patient, they hardly spoke English throughout. They speak with the same language. I think it was it's called Ryakori or something like that. And they spoke fluently. They spent 30 minutes talking. So if your speech recognition system sat in that room and was only designed for English or English accents, and you got zero data throughout that encounter. And so we started to work on languages in 2024, and we were able to build one of the largest data sets for African languages in 2025. This was before the African Next Voices or the Wahal data set came out. And so this was all like proprietary data that we paid for ourselves. Now we're lucky that many data sets are out there, and hopefully it helps improve multilingual performance and robustness across many use cases, many verticals. I think lastly, code switching is the natural next problem. If you're able to do multilingual transcription, one natural thing you start to encounter is people then, let's say you built an English model, it was doing well, then you built a Swahili model, it was doing well. What happens when people then decide to switch between English and Swahili in the same conversation, or you have 2-3 people switching between those languages? What we noticed was that there's a lot of content loss. Your English model does not understand any Swahili. Your Swahili model doesn't understand any English, and so we then started to train models that are bilingual. I think last month, early March, we released the very first like bilingual Swahili English model. We've improved that initial model now. I think there's a third version coming out next month that's way better than even the first model, and that's because, again, the same pattern you're seeing, working with real customers, looking at how they're using models, looking at model errors. And so this cycle results, you have a real world failure that you observe. It leads you to do some deep, so you do your error analysis based on the real world usage, observe those failures, you create a data set that captures those errors, or you simulate a data set that captures those errors, and that helps us maybe update our benchmarks. Once we have that new data set, we then use the training portion of it to update the model, and then push out that test data set as a benchmark. So today we have maybe about 11 or 12 different data sets we've released across different verticals, legal, healthcare, for different use cases. I was hoping that like giving this talk helps anyone who's anyone who's a practitioner understand how to work through problems, and instead of giving up when you encounter difficulties on the field, you just realize that is actually the pattern. That's what everyone is doing. That's what Google is doing. That's what OpenAI is doing. They take all the feedback from customers and use to build the next version of the model. And if you keep doing that over time, your models keep getting better and better. And today, I think I'm proud to say that we have some of the best models for African accents and African languages on the continent. And this is the way we get there. The way you also get there for your use case is continuing to work through problems, understanding that it's not like some easy approach where you just download something from the internet, or you download what how they said, or you download African X Voices training model and everything goes fine from there. That is definitely not the way this works. And you would encounter messy issues. I think there are problems we faced. There are problems. It took us 6 months to fix. Some took us 12 months. Some took us 2 months. And so you're fortunate if you have enough funding to last through that. But I think the goal of this talk is to convey that is the norm. That's the way to build real world AI that works for people. Thank you very much.
Sorry. Thank you very much, Toby, for quite a wonderful talk. I'll bring my slides. Okay, so we have two very interesting spotlight talks. They will take 20 minutes each, and then we'll jump to the panel session. I hope you're not so tired. Yeah, so let me just introduce our next speaker, bringing this. Toby, I think we can take one quick question for Toby. Please unmute yourself and ask. We have a hand online. Fabian. Okay, please unmute yourself.
Yeah, I'm unmuted. I'm muted. I hope I'm audible.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Toby, please, I wanted to ask you that when you're carrying out experiments like this, is there any particular pattern, any pattern you follow? Say you took it from I fine-tuned first on Igbo, or I fine-tuned first on Somali, or I fine-tuned on both of them. Now that this did not work, the new direction is to take fine-tuning from this other direction. Or like how do you pick the next step after you encounter failure from your model?
So good question. I think the first thing I'd like to establish is that failures from models is normal. It's okay. It will happen. There's no one that trains the first model, and that just is it. If that happens to you, you are not in the real world, or you're like maybe in a PhD or a master's program. That's the only place that happens, where you train a model and you get a pass mark. So you would encounter model failures. I think the approach we've taken is to expect that can happen, and sometimes you even plan ahead for it. So you have a list of experiments, you have some a hypothesis, you have sometimes multiple hypotheses. This might work, this might work, this might work, this might work. You have a list of experiments, and then you do something that people call ablations. Ablations means, okay, let's say I thought that starting with training 4 languages would work. I might say, instead of training with 4 languages, let me try training with one language, I train with 2, I train with 3, I train with 4, and see which configuration works best. I can then say, okay, I can pick 2 languages first, and then train with, and then change some other combination of those 2 languages, and do that over and over. And I think the important thing is the process of learning, understanding your models, understanding how the models behave, how your data, the impact your data has on your model and your algorithms, your architecture. I think the most valuable piece is that learning process that is happening, because that your first project may entirely fail. You may not figure out the right thing to do, but if you've learned that process of mapping like a data set to a model architecture, you look at your loss function. Is the problem coming from the loss? Is it coming from the data? Is it coming from your inputs, from your pre-processing or post-processing? That process, when you get to your next project, you're taking all that experience with you, because nobody's going to become a machine learning expert in one day on your first process. So I think the most important thing is to understand that failure is okay, and you need to come back to experiments with new ideas, sleep over it, come up with new ideas, ask people questions, and maybe someday you have a breakthrough.
Thanks
Thank you
again,
very much, sir.
Tobi. Can we appreciate Dr. Tobi one more time, please, everyone? Tobi, you'll have a question on the chat from Olu. Yeah, please answer it. Our next speaker is Korir Kiplangat, who is an AI researcher and engineer based in Nairobi, Kenya, and a co-founder of MsingiAI, a research lab building foundational AI models for African languages. His work focuses on Swahili, NLP, and speech technologies, including Sauti and an open source Kenyan Swahili text-to-speech system, and Msingi One, a Swahili fast decoder-only language model, alongside work on agentic AI systems. He's currently pursuing an MSc in financial engineering at WorldQuant University, where his research explores reinforcement learning for complex financial problems such as market making and portfolio control. He is an advocate for open, community-driven AI that serves underrepresented languages. Let's appreciate Kiplangat as I share his slides.
Hey everyone, good evening. Yeah, thank you for the introduction. I'm listening. So I work at MsingiAI. I'm the founder. And so first of all, don't worry about my slides. I'm so poor with the slides. I need to take a design course. So this is a very, very interesting conversation to have, and thanks to Microsoft Research for having us. And talking about voice AI, and I've really learned a lot from the previous speakers who have shared their experiences. And for me, it's just more like a story. So I'm going to start right away. I'm going to be talking about how to bring Swahili to life. So at MsingiAI around 2 weeks ago, we dropped an open source text-to-speech model called Sauti. And this is going to be the major topic of conversation I'm going to have today. I'm going to be very brief. So first of all, as the previous speakers have said, we have over 200 million speakers speaking Swahili in East Africa, and they remain underserved by modern voice technology. And the generic multilingual models, they fail to capture the unique rhythmic tone and the regional accents of East Africa. So we created Sauti to try to bridge the gap and then try to provide an authentic voice built built for the continent. So I'm going to talk from how we started, from data curation to modeling and how we deployed, because we have a demo on our platform. I could not have the time to have the link, but you can just go to MsingiAI.com and you'll go and see and test the models. So let's start with the data curation. We used the Google Wuxel dataset, which was provided by Google. And it's just really amazing work, which was done by Google. We used their dataset. And we tried to clean the dataset to be ready for training the model. And our approach involved a rigorous pre-processing step where we wanted to see how many speakers are there, what are their accents, what is the gender, and all that stuff. So that was what we did under data curation. So the base model was an F5 model, which was published last year in the Interspeech conference. And the reality is that the base model never saw Swahili speech during training, but we chose the model because it was one of the latest architectural, I think, advancements in architecture when it comes to text-to-speech. But now, here's the reality of the speech, how we speak. The problem now is not like having fluent Swahili. We achieved that perfectly. The reality is this. You see that code switching. A lot of people have talked about code switching a lot. You can see like somebody might be like, hey, niko kwa meeting, nitakucall later, which means I'm in a meeting, I'll call you later. That is one of the major challenge. And Sauti captured the Swahili part well, okay? Like you could just say niko kwenye mkutano, nitakupigia baadaye, and the model will just give you the perfect thing. But the moment when you have like niko kwa meeting, nitakukole later, you will laugh because of what the model will be giving you. So that is the challenge now. The reality is that Swahili is dynamic. It blends a lot. We have the Kenyan young people, Gen Zs, they speak, we could switch a lot. And I think that's the reality all over Africa. So the reality is that we could switch a lot. And that was one of the major problems we encountered when we were building Sauti. Another thing is, I said, forgive me for the slides. I'm not really a good guy with slides. So like the thing is, because we are talking about data from data deployment, from data to deployment and impacts, I think we just look at how are we going to distill some of these models so that they can be available via mobile devices, embedded systems, offline apps, based on the realities which we have in Africa. Okay, so another thing I want to talk about is how can you ship responsibly? Like, what are the ethical foundations about open source development? Like, we need to ensure that the technology remains accessible, which we did with Sauti. We released the model weights, we released the code. It's available on Hugging Face. You can just go, you can test the model. And very soon we are going to provide, we are working on the paper. We are going to release the paper in the coming month for Sauti. So just wait, we're actively working on that. So, also looking at prioritizing ethical data practices and local ownership. So that is what we need to ensure. We need to ensure that we have data sovereignty and also making impact in the community. I think building something responsible AI requires a lot of transparency, ethical data practices, and community trust to actually serve the continent. So did I really share the right slide? Yeah, anyway, I'm not going to use my slide. So this is what we did with Swahili. And I think I shared the wrong slide, sorry. Okay, yeah, but we released Sauti text-to-speech model. I'm sorry about my slides. We released the Sauti text-to-speech model. And the challenges, one of the challenges was code switching, which has been spoken about. And that is what we are actively working on solving. And I think it's not more of an architectural problem, it's more of a data problem. So that is what I wanted to share with you today. Like, we need to solve the data problem if we want to achieve what we really want. If we want a model that can code switch well, we need to provide those data sets which we can code switch between different kind of languages. And I think if we do that, we are going to have models that can actually serve us in the continent. Otherwise, thank you so much. If you have any question, you can just shoot it out.
Let's appreciate the work that that Korir has done on Sauti AI and Msingi Lab. Let's appreciate them one more time. Yeah, and your slides were pretty cool. You don't need training on on making the slides. So yeah, I'll quickly introduce John from Sunbird AI. John is going to present. Okay, one moment for slide transition. So something is happening. So just one more lightning talk, very brief talk, and then we move to the panel session. So this is going to be delivered by Dr. John Quinn, who will speak about multilingual speech LLMs in practice. So Dr. John is the Director of Research at Sunbird AI in Uganda. He was previously a staff research software engineer at Google Research, technical lead for Africa projects at United Nations Global Pulse, and senior lecturer in computer science, honorary associate professor at Makerere University in Uganda. He has worked on so he has worked on a number of large-scale AI projects across the African continent in the fields of remote sensing, speech and language, agriculture, and health. He holds a BA in computer science from the University of Cambridge and a PhD in machine learning from the University of Edinburgh. Let's clap and appreciate John for being here and sharing this topic with us.
Great, thank you so much, Millicent, and thanks for the invitation to this meeting, which is great. I mean, it's like everyone who's anyone in African NLP is here. So yeah, let me try my best after these great speakers. I'll just share my slides. Alrighty. Okay, so for context, Sunbird is a non-profit organization based in Uganda. So we do open source models, open source code. We work with local NGOs and organizations to try to make things for social benefit. So this is a short talk. I'll just give I know this has been a long seminar. People have heard a lot, and I'll keep it brief, but I want to share some experiences of us building these practical systems and give a few reflections about current opportunities and research directions. So we're in a niche within a niche. You know, speech models, there's all this work on AI, right? Like the whole world is abuzz with AI development, but speech models very much get less attention than text or image, and especially like real-time speech models that can reason when prompted with speech. African languages, as we know, that's also a niche, and open source also get some, proportion of the attention. So, to work at this intersection of all of these is a really small, a focused group, but the human impact is just so big. You think of the communication barriers that we could overcome, the practical opportunities for really, significant parts of the world's population. I think we really have a lot of opportunity compared to the amount of focus on it that's been put. So I think we're in a great space here. So Uganda in particular, I want to pitch Uganda as a useful case study for African NLP and speech models. So it's very high linguistic diversity, right? So according to the ethnologue, the 10th highest diversity index worldwide, approximately 40 languages, depending on how you count them. So what we contend is if we can demonstrate full support for Ugandan languages, if it's possible there, then it's possible anywhere. So going beyond the major few African languages, but towards getting closer to the 2,000 or so across the continent, what would that look like, and what would that involve? To really have this broad coverage of language. So I'll run through a few results, a bit of background. So last year we released a text LLM. So based on Quinn 3, we did a 14B and a 32B set of models looking at 31 Ugandan languages. And the main thing is some of these languages have very small resources, but they're kind of connected to each other. So if you put them together, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, and you can actually do quite well with this combination. So here's machine translation performance, and can't quite do better than the best at like Swahili. That's pretty tough. The GPTs and Geminis and so on are pretty good at translating Swahili, but we can be on par, and we can do significantly better at many of these languages, which are really just not on the radar for other model developers. We've since had some interesting experiences with reinforcement learning, particularly group relative policy optimization, which really boost these numbers up a bit more. We might not have much time to get into that now, but I'll give some reflections later. Okay, and I think we heard this perfectly from Dr. Tobi and the other speakers, but some of the Intron experiences were really resonating with me. You're just kind of climbing this mountain of fixing these bugs, and like, oh man, people pronounce numbers differently, or there's this type of background noise that we've got to deal with. And so the reality is, you get people together, you coordinate, look at the errors, and gradually iterate. Okay, so we've got this text LLM, and it can answer questions in different local languages. But when you look at how people use it for, almost everything is translation. This is the real thing people want to use our models for, at least. We have, 1,000 or 2,000 monthly users, and 94% of people want to translate text on a variety of, different topics, as agriculture, health, all sorts of things in there. Okay, so speech. We're talking about speech today, and let me just briefly recap some work which was in Africa NLP this year about taking our text models and plugging in speech encoders. So what we do is we kind of merge together models. So we spent a lot of time on this text LLM that could handle many Ugandan languages. In a parallel stream of work, we've been working on ASR models, mostly based on Whisper Large, and using various tricks, just like we heard from Dr. Tobi at Intron, mixing in realistic background noise from street sounds of Uganda to like dataset cleaning methods, all that kind of stuff. So we felt we had two models to do speech recognition and to do text comprehension fairly well. And we were looking at merging these. And this is surprisingly easy to do. You can actually project from the encoder of one into the text layers of another, and you can actually speak into the model. So you can prompt the model directly with speech. We may be able to hear this.
In this demo.
Yeah, great. Okay, let's quickly listen to a few examples.
In this demo, I will briefly show you the speech capability of Sunflower. So Sunflower has two modes. In speech, we have both the conversation and the translation mode. In the conversation mode, we can have a conversation with Sunflower in speech, and it will be able to respond. Hi, what's your name? how would you explain what climate change is in Luganda?
All right, I think we'll stop there in the interest of time, but I hope you could hear the audio, by the way. You never quite know with remote. So anyway, point is you can prompt it with speech and you very rapidly get the response back. So this is pretty interesting. I just want to give a few reflections about this before I hand over back to Millicent, about where this is going, what the opportunities and challenges are for us right now. So one striking finding for us is that our models are basically just a communication layer. People want to translate, or they want to take speech and transcribe it and translate it. And it doesn't seem clear to us that we need to have a lot of reasoning in our models, for example. This is a big focus of AI research elsewhere, but I think we're conscious that often our models are just used to take speech or to take text and to convert them into a form where people can use ChatGPT or Gemini or a different model. Next observation is that often ASR, people want ASR models, but almost never to do on its own. So ASR is usually part of a model cascade, and the end result is either a translation, a translated summary, or some kind of structured data extraction. And so these speech LLMs, which merge things together, are compelling because you avoid cascading the errors. So some cool stuff coming out. Microsoft's 5.4 releases trained on African languages are very interesting in that respect. We have been getting some interesting perspectives on data collection. As we train the models, we do find out which types of data help to move the needle, make things better, and which we already have enough of. There's a lot of focus in speech models of the number of hours of data you collect. I think we're starting to understand the significance of synthetic data, for example. So, we might think of collecting data not to train the models directly, but to train synthetic data generation models, which you then train the real model with. I think increasingly this is how it's done. And I think this is why in the African NLP community, it's useful to have this, not just data collection, but also data training and these feeding into each other. And I think one of my last reflections, cascade equivalence is a technical challenge that we're looking at overcoming. So, almost all speech LLMs have this structure I mentioned where you have a speech encoder. It projects this encoding into the input embedding of a text LLM. So 5.4 has a conformer encoder, so does Gemma 4. We used Whisper fed into a Quinn text LLM backbone. Almost all speech LLMs work this way. And the advantage is mainly speed, but they are actually no more accuracy. You pay an accuracy penalty for this. And so how can you make this better? In principle, it should be possible to get better than these models run separately, where a speech model detects speech and you pass the text into an LLM. How do we overcome this cascade equivalence? I think is an interesting research direction. And last reflection, we're focusing on models which do specific tasks like translation. And it really helps to say if the models can say when they don't know. We're dealing with languages where some languages have much higher resources than others. And if someone asks a question in a language for which the model had little training data, it helps to be able to give some measure of its confidence in its response. To say I don't know, or to say confidence high, medium, or low. I think this is a really useful behavior. It's actually perfectly feasible to train in. We found that group relative policy optimization is pretty effective for that. Hoping to get some work out soon on that. Okay, so with those scattered reflections, I'll stop there. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. John. Do you have any questions for John? Any quick questions that? Okay, let's appreciate Dr. John one more time for the work that they're doing at Sunbird AI. Okay, so we'll move to the panel session. Bringing back on the panel. I wonder if Dr. Joyce, you are on the call. Maybe you can come. You can.
Yes, I am. Hi, everyone.
And thanks so much for making the time, Dr. Joyce. Thank you for being on camera as well. So I'll start by introducing Dr. Joyce, who is a senior lecturer at the Department of Computer Science at Makerere University and heads the Center for Artificial Intelligence at Makerere University. And I'll move. Is Dr. George Musumba on the call as well? George,
Yes, I am.
be on camera. Yeah, we are also excited to be joined by Dr. George Musumba, who is a Kenyan academic and AI governance expert based at the Dedan Kimathi University of Technology. And then we have on the room, we have Muchai and Yann. Muchai is a research engineer at Microsoft Research Africa lab, where she works. She's leading the research and development of parser, bench parser speech models and co-creating the Gecko play. Please let's appreciate Muchai for being here. And we are also happy to be joined by Yann, who is the co-founder of YUX and Kitala AI, started in Senegal. YUX is a Pan-African research and design company that mixes social science, design, and machine learning to co-create tech and AI products tailored to African communities. These wonderful panelists or the panel session will be moderated by our very own Dr. Girmaw Abebe, who leads the Microsoft AI for Good Lab here in Nairobi.
Thanks, Millicent. A round of applause for Millicent, everyone. I am your moderator, Girmaw from Microsoft AI for Good Lab, but also I'm a very fair moderator. So I realized we didn't stretch our legs actually since after the second talk. So if you just stand up, stretch a bit, say hi to your left, right neighbor for a couple of minutes. See, told you, I'm generous. Keep going, keep going. George, Joyce, are you stretching yourself as well online? Good to have you here. All right. Thanks, everyone. Again, Yann, Muchai, George, Joyce, great to have you for our panel discussion. I always really enjoy panel discussion because it's open, very interactive. I would like to give the audience as well a chance to ask, to put your perspective to the panel discussion. First thing first, without further ado, I would like to start from George, actually, with whom we have been working to design Kenya's AI policy, just really to introduce yourself in your way and potentially link what you do in the space. Then I will follow it to Joyce, then Muchai and Yann. George.
Yeah, so thank you, Girmaw. You can hear me, hopefully?
Yes.
Yeah, so yes, my name is George Musumba. A lecturer at Kiplangat University of Technology in Kenya, Nyeri. Computer science, that's my field for both undergraduate and to PhD, focused on AI. I do research on AI for good related issues. But I noticed also in this space, we have policymakers who are determining a lot of things for us as technologists. I thought maybe how do we then come to the table? Because once they make the decisions for us, we need to follow or do what they want. I thought of coming in the space also, that I also become part of the policy influencers in the space. I found myself in the policy space. Currently, we are also working, as Girmaw said, coming up with the Kenya AI and other emerging tech policy, which is now almost being done. Stakeholder engagements. Also, we are now doing the drafting activities. The next 2 weeks or so, should take it public for validation. So yes, I do teaching, research, and also policy. Not governance, but policy. Part of the policy activities in the country. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, George. Definitely, we will come back to you when we discuss those policy details and the conversation with respect to innovation. Joyce, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Girmaw, and nice to see you. I know virtually. I feel like we meet every week these days. I should just move to Nairobi. Yeah, hi, everyone. I'm Joyce Nabende. I'm a senior lecturer in the Department of Computer Science at Makerere University. And I also lead a research lab at Makerere University where we're doing work in AI for language, health, and agriculture. And looking at really supporting and building capacity amongst students who are interested in doing AI research. I'm really very passionate around language technology. Much of the work that we've done over the years is to really try and build up the language ecosystem on the continent and ensuring that we have the resources, that we're able to have end user applications and seeing that how this can be applied in different domains, specifically in agriculture and also in healthcare. Currently, I also I'm very interested in seeing how we can be able to scale AI innovations away from the lab, but that they can, be used and taken up in industry. So that's also something that's very. I think there's someone speaking in the background. Yeah, sorry, as I was saying, yeah, I also love to work around scaling of AI innovations out of the lab into the field that people can actually uptake and use up these technologies. So that's something that's close to my heart, and responsible AI is also another focus of research that we're working on around trying to evaluate large language models in the African continent and seeing that these are not biased and that they're able to serve the communities for which they're being developed. Yeah, so thank you. Looking forward to the discussion on the panel today. Yeah, back to you, Girmaw.
Thank you, Joyce. Muchai, I saw you leading the PASA work from a hackathon a year ago to become such a successful benchmark leaderboard in the ecosystem with your team, of course. But tell us a bit more.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here. My name is Mercy Muchai. I'm a research engineer at the Microsoft Research Africa Lab here in Nairobi. And some of the work that we've been doing so far has been on building speech models for low resource languages, starting with Kenyan languages. So some of that work was motivated by building the idea of building equitable AI beyond text. We know that today's AI technology is more usable in text modality, but that's not the reality of how end users want to interact with AI. They want to have these other modalities of speech, being able to have AI reasoning on video, and that's what motivated some of the work on PASA, evaluating how today's models work on African languages and even seeing how can we go beyond evaluation to training the models and creating community toolkits for the same. I'll talk more about that later, but thank you.
Right. Yeah. I don't where we met first. Was it in Dakar in Dabo or Kigali?
Kigali in Dabo.
And are you based here or in Kigali? You need to explain that. But the floor is yours.
Changes are in the air, but no, still Dakar. So hi everyone. I'm Yann. I've been based in Dakar for a long time. Still living there with my family, but we have a company that does social and behavioral research and human-computer interaction work across the continent. We actually have several colleagues from the Nairobi team and the Kigali team in the room today, so please connect with them. I run, for the past 10 years, a research and design firm, so mostly working with the tech sectors. So the Google, the Meta, the Wikipedias, who knows they don't understand very well the continent, but need to do research, mostly user research, and a little bit of design for their products, but also the development sector, like the Gates Foundation, the UNICEF, and so on. A lot on health. And a year and a half ago, we were very frustrated to see these AI companies coming to us for testing, but we did not understand how AI worked because we were social scientists. And so we thought, okay, let's hire some AI engineer and try to put all the people in the room together online and see how that works. And that was fun at the beginning because obviously it's not the same culture at all. And we had a lot of reflection from the social researcher versus AI. And so we built that little by little. And it took off. So we worked on ASR for maternal health, very specifically leveraging all the work we've done in the past around maternal health. But we also done work around evaluating models around cultural stereotypes. So removing the biases, or at least identifying the biases you can have. And that, talked to us a lot about how you create a data set, how you have humans in the loop, how you do benchmarks and evaluation. And so we built a platform that is called Kitala, that is a scalable AI evaluation platform, leveraging humans. We really want to make sure you have humans in the loop. But for us, this is what we've been doing in the past 10 years, like all these operations things, that is the hardest thing to do, bringing people of very segmented profiles to be evaluating models. And of course, we still do benchmarks and create different benchmarks, notably on very specific topic that touch on social norms, notably releasing a benchmark on social norms for maternal health in Senegal. So that's why we do. Very happy to be here. I'm very humbled. As I said, very smart people online and here, so happy to be here. Thanks.
Great. Keep the mic. My follow-up question is: so we have the panelists from academia with a bit of intersection with the policy making ecosystem from big tech and startup, and then similar ecosystems. I'm sure the audience will appreciate to hear your unique perspectives on AI, but specifically, we always try to optimize between opportunity, but still we have challenge, but also there is potential risk. What's your take on that aspect, opportunity, challenge, and risk as you develop such AI tool in your space?
Well, I think from a company perspective, you have salaries to pay at the end of the month, right? We have 50 people in our team, so it's not too big. But still, when we invested in AI, it was at a time where last year was very difficult. So how do you convince an entire team to keep hiring machine learning engineer that nobody knows what was it doing really? Why you still let go some of the people on social science, and that was really hard. So this third thing for us is very key, because right now I think most of the people in our team understand the sacrifice that we do to build that. And so to your point, they understand when we prioritize opportunities. I guess most of the people understand that we are here, of course, to do research. We want to do academic level research, but at the same time, we have the constraints of the startups. And we need to be able to push products that make sense for people, that make sense for our existing clients, while we do learnings and share that with the broader community. That can come back to the point of even open sourcing data. Obviously, some of the work that we do is funded through grants foundation, through grants from different foundations. But open sourcing everything may not be the best model for startups.
So we're struggling with that. We have conversation with the broader ecosystem, with some of the founders, to see if there is models that we can find, maybe where only part of the data set is open source, even if you receive a grant for research, things like that. But then after, it's also something that you need to do a lot of your own research, looking at the field, to understand what's useful and what's already been done. And what's frustrating, of course, is when you see you've been working for 6 months on ASR and you see OpenAI releasing a new thing that is better than your work. And that's the truth, and that's gonna keep going. But it's also very interesting because you need to deep dive in the things that they are not capable of doing. And I think we were well placed as social researchers to understand the things are very peculiar on our continent, and identify very specific niche or segmented, profiled population, a remote population, where we believe this is the hard thing to do and valuable work to do. So yeah, it's a work in progress.
Perfect. Muchai, even if you are at Microsoft Research, you interact with Digital Green, you go to the farm, you have that experience. What do you see across opportunity, challenge, and risk?
So first on the opportunity, I think we all know that Africa is highly made up of small and medium businesses. A lot of the people who are doing work, startups and businesses are not large companies in Africa. Over 80% of Africa is made up of small and medium businesses, some of them that are one person alone. And given the AI diffusion we see from the global north versus the global south, the challenges of the global south on AI diffusion are based on barriers, existing barriers, which we shouldn't see as barriers, but as opportunities, and we should build based on that. So language diversity, our cultural diversity here in Africa, the modalities in which we want to interact with AI. We want to be mobile first because most people are interacting with technology on their phones, not on a computer. So those are opportunities that we see. Another big opportunity is that a lot of people are not desk workers, they're frontline workers. So majority of Kenya, for example, is in agriculture. A lot of them are in businesses out there. So when we think about the AI opportunity, it's a little bit different from how other countries might be. And thinking of that as the opportunity space while also addressing the challenges is important. One of the biggest challenges I see today is from our interactions so far on PASA and even on Project Gecko, trying to build this AI capability, multimodality in for farmers in Kenya, is thinking about how do you go beyond English and enable these multilingual capabilities for them. And then how do you make sure that this translates into their business use case, not just measuring how good the models work, but also what their end user outcomes are. And so I think we need to go beyond measuring AI tools today on existing benchmarks and actually thinking what is the end user's intended positive outcome. The risks I see, I think a lot of them have been mentioned, but on the responsible AI case, there isn't enough red teaming for African languages, African cultures, moving from global measurements of harm and risk to localized contexts, as well as moving from text-based measurements of risk and harms to voice, video, image modality. I think that's both an opportunity and a risk that's important. Another one that I see is policy. I think we've talked a lot about all the work that's happening on data creation. It's a really great time to see all the work that's going on dataset creation by a lot of the organizations today. But at the same time, we need to think about, even though the data sets are licensed for research and are non-commercial, who benefits after the communities have created the data sets? What's the data ownership policies on that? And at the end of the day, once the models are created, we have to go back to those communities and be able to evaluate and create real benefits for them.
Wonderful, Muchai. So attendees both in the room and online, listen carefully what they are saying about opportunity, challenge, and risk, and jot down if there is something missing or something you don't agree, so that I will give you the option to put back. I will go to Joyce. If you could highlight on those 3 points, Joyce, and even more actually. I saw you working in healthcare, in agriculture, in language lately. Where do you think in African AI we have more opportunity because AI is not at the same level for addressing different challenges and sectors. So over to you, Joyce.
Yeah, thank you very much, Girmaw. I think thinking about the African continent, I believe that based on all the work that we've been doing so far around creating data sets, if I think about language and speech, there's just a lot of depth of work that has already been shared on this webinar, creating the data sets, trying to evaluate different models, and looking at different nuances around language, like the problem around code switching, for example. So I feel like a very good opportunity for us to really think through as we continue to work in the AI space on the African continent is to consider domain-specific applications that are useful for an end user. And the example of a project that we're working on right now is trying to understand how to be able to help in mental health diagnosis, but based on speech that people can call in and based on the analysis of speech that you can be able to understand and see how to, for example, escalate if a call comes in and someone is speaking and saying, oh, I feel depressed, or I feel something, going on with me. How can I escalate this to a mental health specialist? This could be an easy problem to do in English, but when you start to think about having expression of depression or mental health in a domain, in a local language, that becomes incredibly very difficult, because these are things that maybe are not known to us. Maybe they don't even appear in our local language, the expressions in the mental health domain. And I see this as a great opportunity for us to tap into that. Now that we have built the foundation, we've done, evaluations of the data sets of the models, that we can now provide and get into actual use cases that can be useful for end users, that can be useful to help, for example, a health worker, a mental health specialist who needs to, understand and go through a call and see how you can be able to help a patient on the other end, but the patient is speaking to you in a local language, or they're code switching, for example, and that's something that that is important for you to work on. So I see that really as a great opportunity for us, that then we can now delve into these use cases that can add value as we continue to do work in AI. I think for the challenges, not necessarily to add on what has been said around policy, around governance, I think that's critical. As I think about my work around scaling, and you're saying, okay, I want to scale an AI system, our ecosystem, for example, in Uganda, yes, I know some countries on the continent are more advanced. We are, trying to come up with a strategy which is going to be launched very soon. But what happens if we have this strategy? Does it speak to all the different areas where we think the AI use cases are going to be scaled? If I think about healthcare, which is a sensitive domain, does it speak to what it means to have an AI system that is ready to be rolled out, to be used by health workers? I see that there are gaps around that regulation, and looking at policies in different countries, and speaking from my Ugandan context around how to regulate and how to govern the AI models, that we are very passionate about, and ensuring that we can be able to use them, again, thinking about the end user, because I feel like that's a very good use case that we can start to think about. Yeah, so I think I will not repeat. I focus on health, but I feel like I just wanted to add on to the other additions that have already come in from my other panelists. Thank you.
Thanks, Joyce. George, I know you, as a part of building the Kenyan policy, you had a conversation with different stakeholders, from policy making, startup ecosystem, organizations working with children and school. What did you hear from those conversations?
Yeah, thank you, Girmaw, for this opportunity. Yes, think in the work we are doing currently in the AI policy development for the country. So as you said rightly, we have been engaging various stakeholders, mostly those even who are marginalized in the sectors, like the children, the youth, and the women, and PWD. People in the process, even some of them almost sued us for being left out in the process. So the issue is each category of people have their own, I can say, needs or requests or challenges that they want addressed in the framework that we come up with as a government or as a country. because like children who are mostly users of the applications, or the youth, people who are under 20 years, they have their needs because they are the users, most users this, and they have no voice in the table to discuss these issues. So they need to be listened to or have their issues addressed. Youth, similar case, even women and other people marginalized. Even the gig workers also are loud in this because this issue of summer source, people who were largely used to do open AI. Of course, there were an issue with payment, the process. So those are the things they really want addressed or be captured going forward, that there's no repeat of the same in the framework that we come up as a country. So yes, the issues, but I think as if we have inclusivity in the process, I believe going forward shall have an inclusive document that then will address all our issues, and of course, the opportunities that come in the process. Something that I've seen, like this week, we have been having the Connected Africa Summit in the country. And I was privileged to be part of one of the panelists or discussions about governance issues. And I think the issue that was coming out, where is Africa in the table? Because we try, or we want to be included in the process. So inclusivity has been a term being used all the time. But I think there's another term that's now coming up. Can you set the agenda that able also to become of the agenda setting, that we also be able to drive the process going forward?
Thank you. Thank you, George. Room, this is your opportunity to comment and reflect. Is there any challenge, opportunity, risk you think hasn't been mentioned or mentioned, but you probably don't agree? If you have, such a comment to share, please raise your hand, introduce yourself, and let's hear from the room. If there is online, please raise your hand for those in the room. Millicent will help us providing mic. Introduce yourself and then the comment.
Hello, my name is Mark Gatere from Dedan Kimathi University of Technology. So I'm excited to see Dr. George Musumba on the call. My question is, I've been in a number of sessions which are talking about the challenges of AI, but I haven't heard compute being mentioned. As much as we're talking about data, we're not talking about infrastructure. Is it like not a challenge? Because recently there was actually an article by Daily Nation Africa that stated that we only have about 2 data centers in Kenya that support the NVIDIA data center, the cards like the H100s or A100s, and in Africa we have about 10. Is compute not a challenge when we were working on the local models? Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Anyone in the room? Anyone on the line wants to chime in?
Hi, my name is Ongoy Commander. I'm a designer. I think one thing that I haven't had mentioned, or if it has, maybe I feel like we should put more emphasis, is on the supply chain, AI supply chain. I'm talking here about annotators. It's been a huge labor issue in Kenya and I guess across the world. We talk about we need to build the data sets, and ideally, if it's for African language, it's definitely going to be Africans doing that. But we don't have the best labor laws, and the fact that AI is unpredictable and not well understood from a public sector point of view, I imagine that there's a lot that goes, a lot that isn't well looked at in terms of even compensation, work hours, and so on. So AI will need humans. As you say, we keep on talking about human in the loop. But I think the organizations who are leading in this AI and all these advancements also need to put out ethical policies for who should annotate their AI. At the end of the day, I don't think AI annotated by people who are not well protected by labor laws is ethical. I don't think we should use it. And I think that's really important.
Thank you. Anyone online? Oh, some, okay.
Yeah, so mine is an extension of his question.
Introduce
Just about-
yourself and
I'm Kevin from JCOT. Okay. It's an extension of his question. He asked something about infrastructure, but more from a development perspective. So I'm asking from the point of implementation. He mentioned, I think it's either him or her, they mentioned something about targeting the frontline workers. So most of those frontline workers, some of them are in places where the internet is not so stable. So if your model relies on sending data back to the cloud for processing and then back, it may not be ideal. And a number of those devices are not strong enough to support the offline models. So also, I'm interested to learn how they are circumventing such challenges when it comes to rolling out the AI solutions.
Thank you. This side of the room is quiet. I don't know, is that because you are closer to nice view to the window? All right.
Good afternoon to everyone. My name is Cecilia. I'm a lecturer at St. Paul's University. I think the other one that we haven't mentioned is security. Of course, AI is online. They've mentioned about computing, but let's think about security, especially because I think we haven't really talked about the issues around privacy. I think would be one of those key things. But security, I would think protecting the actual data, protecting the actual system that the AI runs on, whether physically or through the computers, as been mentioned. But I feel these haven't been mentioned yet. They feed into policy, governance, of course, and risk.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kofi. I work with Mozilla. I think Mercy mentioned something important around SMEs being, our largest base. And for those of us who are researchers and have seen the trajectory of technology history in Africa, when it comes to scaling of tech products, it's more focused on high resource environment and settings. What I mean by that is those who have high-end devices, high income communities have access to these products. And I think I'm seeing a similar transition to AI products as well. And majority of the conversations have been less focused on low resource environment. For languages, yes, I think it's highly focused on low resource. But when it comes to actual product scale, I think that is something that we really need to take a look at. Otherwise, we're going to have a repeat of the previous technologies we've seen across Africa. Thank you.
One last, maybe this one.
Good evening. My name is Kinsey, and I'm a product manager. My question is specifically towards the angle of policy and accessibility. How do we ensure that the policies that we have are accessible to the small-scale companies? I know the hesitation that comes towards complying with policy most of the time is because of the barrier to entry. There's a lot of uncertainty regarding cost, regarding compliance. So as we develop a policy for Kenya, what does that look like and how do we ensure we're being inclusive?
Great. I think that's what I really love, Mercy. Moderate panel discussion, great insight from Mark on computing and followed with supply chain and then more of like how beyond computing the way we can make it sustainable, privacy, security, mentioned, and inclusivity. I think just my take on this is opportunity and risk is different across different location and context. In fact, last week, myself and Joyce were in Madrid for the UN panel. The conversation is like, what is opportunity for Kenya may be a risk for someone else, right? We are not very keen to have a driverless car in Wayakue because we have more, concern and priority for agriculture and healthcare, right? So when you think about what is our opportunity, what's our risk, it could vary across locations and across contexts, and very important to take into that consideration. But one point I do believe is also very critical to build AI solution the right way and impactful way is co-development and collaboration. If you are working in education, finance, healthcare, if you don't collaborate with different stakeholders, you don't not only solve the problem, first, you don't understand the problem. When you build AI, understand the problem first. For that to happen, you need to engage the AI experts, the policymakers, the clinician, the domain experts. That is very critical. And I see most of the time, organizations, entities working separately without communicating. And that's a bit of a gap I see in the space. Let me come back to Yann. You mentioned you work a lot and big tech come up with big model that outperform what you have been doing for some time. Open source is often a question. Sometimes for small startup, data is their IP. You cannot just let all the data, out. This begs the question of how do you balance it? You could have this emerging, new models every week, global foundation models, but also you have local context, local structure. We know those global models will not work effectively across different contexts in Africa, but at the same time, we will never build such a big model because we don't have the data nor the computing capability. The question always comes back to how do we balance and optimize it? What's your take?
Thanks for that. And thanks for all the questions, by the way. I noted them down and Muchai did as well. Happy to catch up on that. I think your point touched on several questions around the compute, the access to remote areas. I think what we've seen from the most successful startups in AI, if there is, we can call that success so far, but I think it's companies that were doing some job for the previous years before AI, and right now they use AI to expand their reach, go faster, go better at the service they provide. Jacaranda Health is one example. They've been doing maternal health services through IVR, through phone calls for several years, and right now they're implementing AI system to make them better. To your point, I think these guys, they know the ground. And so when we think about partnerships and doing things that the big one can't do it, we shouldn't really look at the very new created AI startups that's supposed to transform everything, transform agriculture or health or anything, but maybe look at the people that were doing this job the hard way for the previous year and go work with them because they have the contact with the local communities. They know the ground and so on. But so what we can bring them is maybe the technical expertise, the research expertise. It is exactly like what Microsoft did, partnering with Digital Green. This was the exact best approach where a big player can bring all the resources they have, including in compute power, probably, but also in terms of skills, obviously. Hiring a Muchai I could not afford, but obviously if you're partnering with them, you have Muchai working for you. And that's amazingly positive. So I think this is one thing. What we've been doing in the sense on the specific vertical of evaluation is making sure that you are able to connect with people from remote areas, less connected persona, if I can call them, and recruit them for the evaluation. So sometimes you need to have an intermediary. So you will have surveyors that we have on the ground that come and they do the evaluation with them so that you can still get data on if the model works or not for people who could be in remote settings, which I think is very valuable. Today, when you look at the evaluation landscape, we don't segment. We don't even know who annotates the data sets that we use for benchmarking. And even to your point on data workers, I think also seeing people just as general data workers is not fruitful for them and for the entire industry. But the more we get to specific profile, probably the more people will understand the value of having people doing this hard job of collecting the data and contributing their data. And maybe then they would have, higher pay and also more recurring work for them, more engaging, and also sharing of the data. Like Muchai said, how can we go back to the communities and share the work, the result of the work that they've been contributing to?
Yeah, great. Thanks, Yann. Joyce, I will come back to you. Given you work in such a collaboration with academia, local farmers and health professionals, but also I see you collaborate a lot to entities outside Africa and all that. What does that you find it working? What do you learn? How to balance that locally first versus the global trajectory?
Yeah, thanks, Girmaw. I think thinking about the collaborations that we do both locally and maybe outside of Uganda is, for me, it's who's going to benefit from this collaboration. And the example I can give is around the data collection, because the data collection, I think it's an easy one for us to understand because of all the efforts that have been coming in around big tech and collecting data sets that they intentionally have an idea of what they want to use the data sets for. But as researchers from our context, we also can leverage on that to, for example, make sure that when we collect these data sets, that they are made open source, but also the fact that we can provide an opportunity for our students to be able to use these data sets to start to have something that they can, work with, to learn how to deal with data sets, how to work and how to build the models on these data sets, such that at the end of the day, that we don't just collect for them, that we collect, that we can also be able to benefit through capacity building. We can benefit through building out end user applications out of these data sets that are coming out from the different universities and the different collaborations that we have. So I think there's really this delicate balance of that when we get into this collaboration, we should also have our view taken into consideration, that there's benefit for us as we get into this collaboration. If we are defining a problem, it should be a problem that's not given to us from the collaboration that's coming, but it's a problem that is really co-designed with the community, because at the end of the day, it should be that we are driving to ensure that when we have a tool developed, when we have a solution done through this collaboration, that it can benefit the end user. And it can only benefit the end user when you think about them from the beginning and not at the end, when the data has been collected, or at the end when the solution has probably been developed. So that's really been the approach, that there's really this co-design together with the community to understand, to help us formulate a problem that's AI worthy, and to push the agenda, knowing that at the end, when we have this collaboration, that we are also benefiting out of it, and it's not just them benefiting, but we can also have our views being heard and making sure that this is considered as we carry out this collaboration. So that's something I think that I can talk about here. Yeah, thanks. I hope that answers the question.
It does, at least for me. George.
Yes, what the question for me? Sorry.
No, so the question is like a follow-up. You engage different ecosystems in that policy framework, but also you are part of the academia. And there is always that sort of sometimes contention between local sovereignty, local infrastructure, local development, but also, as Yann mentioned, there is that overwhelming, accessibility and development of models globally that are becoming powerful. And what do you see working in as a balance between those locally first versus adopting global wins?
Yeah, so thank you for the question. Yes, I mean, academia also in policy space. So maybe there's a thing that some lady asked, I think, about policy accessibility. Let me bring from there first. Looking at our context locally, we tried to really engage stakeholders' involvement in the input capturing stages. And a number of stakeholders were part of the process. I know there were some who were never reached out, though there was a trial to do some webinars for them so that they're able to also give their feedback in the process. But I think going forward, because some were missed out, the best would be, the thing which is the plans in the process is to do a validations, again, process that now is inclusive, that anyone who was missed out in the earlier stages then can then give their views, then inform the policy that will be developed in the process. So that is one way to maybe arrest any missed out stakeholders in the process. But then again, yes, there are a number of import of models to the country or to our local scenarios, which are not locally developed. And I know big tech could be the culprits in this particular process. I think there have been some, I can say, efforts to have locally contextualized development of policies, not policies, models, applications which are using local data sets to really address local challenges or local issues in the country. So I think that's one way to address that. Also, there's the bit of do we have control of our data sets or models or system developments, which is being called sovereignty in the process. But there have been discussions or contentions. Do we go solo, individually? Yet we are basically in the global space because we cannot, like somebody said, and we don't have local infrastructure, local compute power. Here the very less, those those compute power is already existing elsewhere in the globe. So do we like go local? Do we collaborate globally? Do we go independent in the interdependent global space? So those are the things that the discussions or issues being discussed are. So I think, in my view, we could first of all have our own, can say, data inside by people, but then able to have some policies to have how we share this data outside there. How once the data is shared outside there, how do we then benefit as communities? What value do we derive from the data that are being done from us, being shared out there to do global applications that are being used? So basically, we might not control or be sovereign as such, but then you can see how to be interdependent with other global players.
Thanks, George. I would like to give the room also an opportunity to interject. What did you find working when you build AI solutions in the local context? You have big models, but also you want to add value locally. Think about it so that you could share, but I would like to give a chance for Muchai to reflect on, you are in big tech, Microsoft research, but I know you also are not far away from academia, given your collaboration with Maseno and others. What do you see working and what do you recommend so that we can be more productive going forward?
Yeah, first, I'd like to pick it up from some of the questions that were raised in the room about data centers and low resource settings. I think what we already see as the building blocks for AI, I encourage those who haven't seen the Microsoft AI diffusion report to have a look. Some of the building blocks of AI today are first electricity, and then internet penetration, and then digital skills, who has the devices, and then we go all the way up to AI usage. And looking at the over 8 billion people we have, we only have about maybe 1 billion of those who are AI users. That translates to what are the gaps in those building blocks. In Kenya specifically, when I think about data centers, or even in Africa, the amount of electricity required to power a data center of whatever size. So for example, in Kenya, maybe you guys have seen this, that probably for one data center, it would require a third of the power that we already have. So where does that come from? Do we have the infrastructure in our country to be able to support that? And who misses out when such an investment is made? Thinking also about the energy implications on the environment and the communities that are impacted by creation of these data centers is critical. On the low resource settings, we are doing some work to look at quantization of models and making them smaller. We've seen that today, even when you train models, and of course the usage of models is not isolated. As I said, with the creation of PASA, even though we worked on speech models, the real use case was actually AI reasoning on video modality. So Digital Green had already been in the space, and they had over 7,000 climate smart videos in over 50 languages. And so using that localized data set as a knowledge base for farmers was something that the farmers actually wanted to learn from. But looking back, AI needed to be good at speech for those languages, machine translation, reasoning on those languages, vision models. So looking at them as one piece at a time, and then thinking about how do you create this ecosystem where people actually benefit? I think I wanted to just say that the quantization question is looking at what do you lose when you make models smaller, and when you don't make them smaller, what is the investment the end user is willing to make? We saw that with Digital Green, farmers who did not have smartphones were willing to actually invest in a smartphone because they saw the benefit to their other farmer friends, right? In the corporations they exist, they already are in a social setting where they learn from each other, and they exist in corporations for dairy, for coffee. And so being able to see the benefit others are getting allowed them to invest. So I think there's two ways to look at it, as well as on the corporation ecosystem side. Digital Green also collaborated with Safaricom to be able to actually make their app data free. So that means that there's other conversations that can happen to make sure that AI capability is available for the end user from a telco side, from an internet accessibility side, and also from a sociality side. I don't know if I answered your question.
More than answering it, actually. Again, I will come back to the audience. Muchai, you reminded me a few things. At Microsoft AI for Good Lab, we recently released what we call the AI diffusion report. And if you saw that, there is a divergence on how AI is being adopted globally. That means there is a risk, right? When we say AI could be an opportunity to solve many challenges, but at the same time, as any technology, it has a risk to even increase inequality if we don't adopt it the right way, without guardian and a responsible way. And I think Mark mentioned computing, but beyond even computing, the whole electricity connectivity part is a very key denominator to even think about in adopting AI. The digital skills, the AI skill set, the language models, the trust. You may have the nice Swahili model, but if people don't trust to interact with it, to make decisions, that's also a big question mark to really adopt AI. But more importantly, at AI for Good, we have been working many problems. At least what we saw work is always understand the problem before you try to solve it with your fancy model. As again, that means collaboration, understand the problem. And then Muchai mentioned, for who are you going to build that solution? Who is going to use that? And what kind of impact are you going to generate? And what are that local context? If you are building for the decision maker at Safaricom or Ministry of Health, what is their reality today? What kind of human capital do they have? What kind of infrastructure do they have? All these are less technical, but very critical to build AI solution, because that informs the kind of data you need to collect, the kind of model you need to adopt, the kind of evaluation you need to put on. So again, remember impact, resource, and end user when you build AI solution. I know we have a few minutes, but again, I'm a fair moderator. This is for you, the audience. Any question that has not been answered or any perspective you want to share, or ask the panelists before I give them the last chance to share their takeaway messages. Yeah. Introduce yourself and the organization you're working.
Hello, everyone. My name is Oche. Can you hear me? Yeah. Hello, everyone. My name is Oche, and I'm currently working at YUX Design as a machine learning engineer. Shout out to Yann. Right. So I guess one of the things I wanted to add is, on the concept of cultural relevance, evaluations, data sets, and models, and all of that, and the importance of building with community and not just for them. Because one of the things that we've realized, especially when it comes to building models, fine-tuning, is the importance of having community right from the start, even from the data collection to everything. Because sometimes maybe you fine-tune an ASR model on a particular language, right? It does well, maybe with the data sets you find online. And there's usually this temptation to sort of like fill in the gap with synthetic data, right? But then when you take these models into the field, the results become very different, right? And example is maybe you could fine tune a model, it has a very good WER score. You take it to the field and then it drops drastically. So these are some of the things that, we need to take into perspective, just like Muchai mentioned about red teaming, making sure that, they are very adversarial, making sure that the model is not, you're not giving the model any chance to just generalize in that sense. And also the issue of data contamination in terms of benchmarks is a conversation I actually had this morning with Yann and the team. This issue of benchmarks being contaminated, there's this huge reliance on benchmarks, right? And there is always this, risk of data contamination where the model is now trained on that benchmark, right? The model, it's no longer giving you relevant answers. Rather, it's just spewing out memorizations that it has gotten from the benchmark. So I think we need to be more rigorous with, benchmarks, especially culturally relevant and domain-specific benchmarks as well. So that's just the addition on it too.
Thanks. Great point. I think that also connects back to what Vukosi was mentioning, right? How do you evaluate? How do you measure the measurements? Please go ahead.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Abdulrahman. Until very recently, I was working with the G42 in development of a lot of foundation models for both like LLMs and audio. And I just wanted to share a lot of the different things that we were doing.
You said until recently.
Yes.
So what are you up to now?
So up to now, I'm just independent and I'm doing AI consultations for like
See,
startups and VCs. Yeah.
Yes, if you need an independent consultant, we have one here.
Yeah. So what I want to say is that we were training LLMs for the global South, and we ran into all the problems that everybody mentioned today. So the scarcity of one of the main focuses was the Arabic language. So I think in the first presentation, we said there's only like 1% of like Arabic language available online. That was one of the challenges. So in order to do that, we did a lot of different things. Like we started getting all different books that were scanned. And then we've built our own data annotation team. And then the way we did it for them is that we built a platform for them to annotate. We started upskilling them in AI so that they can do this for a certain time and then go into like better jobs. And also we started improving our like ASR models. We started building them for like the local dialects by using the team to annotate and like transcribe data. Also for the OCR, we did a lot of manual work on the OCR data to like correct it after doing it like automatically because Arabic is a bit complicated. And I want also to highlight one of the, like we did a lot of work for red teaming, for building data sets that are very localized, like local cultures, like wedding traditions, local celebrations. We collected a huge set of data from our team, and we used all of that to instill in the models we are developing so that they can have the local culture. And of course, we did a lot of like red teaming, testing on the models. We implemented a lot of guardrails on them. So like it's been a very long journey. We're still like they're still enhancing on them and improving them, but it's a lot of work and it's like a lot of collaboration. And it did not stop only at us. Like we're collaborating with like the media agency to get copies of the news they are publishing, like all the magazines and the news, they're giving it to us. They are giving us the recordings from the radio stations and TV. So we're able to use all of that and bring it all together for the benefit of these models. I just wanted like to give an idea of the other work that was done.
Thank you. I saw one person online. Is that Fabian? If you just unmute and share your perspective.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Henry Alo Fabian, and I'm an undergrad at Babcock University, Nigeria. And as right from my 200 level, my second year in university, I've always wanted to, delve into machine learning research, draw inference, create models that can actually help me solve problems I face every day. But the, the truth is that in as much as I've seen significant progresses, I've always been looking for where to get industry level guidance, and because I know people ahead of me, people that have done PhDs and masters, can see things, can tell me things that would take me maybe 3 4 months to gain. So I want to ask, as somebody that hasn't taken their MSc or haven't started a PhD, where I can contribute, where I can use the skills I've built already to make significant contributions.
Thank you, Fabian. Given the timeline, I don't want to hold the audience in the room. So I will just give last chance for the panelists just to share their parting shots for the audience in 1 minute or less.
Okay.
Your parting, like, take-home message, like if people want to remember 1 or 2 key things from your perspective, what will that be?
So I think I'll start with first thanking everyone for all the efforts that are already happening for dataset creation. I think since the last deep learning in Daba, there's been thousands of hours of data sets, especially in the speech space, that are being released continually. And that creates a really good environment for research and development that can scale. I think, secondly, it's just to say that even as we conduct our research, so for example, with the PASA models, we really wanted to understand what is the minimum threshold of data that is meaningful to have good results. And we did see that the threshold is about 150 to 300 hours of data. However, the key part there was just learnings on language complexity and how that impacts our measurements and how models perform. And just to highlight some of the gaps there, that of course Bantu languages are more prevalent here in Africa, and a lot of the Latin script languages is what the models have been trained on before you even fine-tune them. So going back to, for the languages that are more complex, which are tonal and of non-Latin script, there's still some work that needs to be done to be able to tokenize the models better, to be able to fill those gaps, especially for Nilo-Saharan and Afroasiatic languages. I think the other parting thing that I wanted to say is, was mentioned slightly during the initial meeting, is initial presentation by Vukosi, was we need to embed our research more with the users and actually conduct these user studies and explain what consent means when you're collecting any evaluation data, and making sure that the data you collect follows the guidelines of when you're supposed to delete it. If it was for evaluation, don't use it for training. Those are really key things that build trust with communities today. And that enables us to have an ecosystem that actually creates a good environment for AI to grow. I think finally is just to encourage more collaboration in the space, because we have a lot of opportunity. I see a lot of the challenges as things we have to take on as not just constraints, or edge cases, but things we build with that in mind. So that's just my parting shots. Thank you.
That's quite a few parting shots. Do you want time or should we go online?
All the same as Musari said, no, but I think I can only emphasize on the need to have a specific methodology to engage with the users, because it is one thing to say it, but it's really hard, and it's actually not easy. You need methods, you need tools, and you need people to do that well. And obviously, the playbooks that Microsoft release are very useful in that sense, and others are doing amazing work in that. Engaging with people to make sure your AI is relevant for a specific context is not that easy. We're building a platform. It's called Kitala AI. Check it out if you are an AI engineer or AI researcher, so that you can scale your human-based evaluation. I think we need to bring some of this kind of research, the rigor that we have in research, in the way we segment people, in the way we address people, in the way we come back to the people we engage with, so that it's not extractive type of practices. I think we need to bring that more into the AI space. Second thing I want you guys to stay with is many people are doing great stuff before AI, and they are going to be the ones still in touch with the people who are going to need AI stuff if they need. And so engage with these guys. You know, if you are an AI engineer here in this room, engage with some of the big and small companies that already do work on agriculture, on education, on health, and help them build different models, different tools that are very cost efficient, easy for them to use for their own users, and bring them all this research methodology. There is a lot of hope. I mean, it's super exciting to be again at this time, because I mean, if you see the parallel with the mobile and, you know, where the huge impact it had, I think it's very exciting. At the same time, when I do the same parallel, I think all the thing we did in the past was not bringing the designer, the researchers too early, and it was really much driven by the engineers. And I think it was really the point of Jackie in the opening. So make sure if you are an AI-related startup or you do work on AI, that you bring people from other discipline from the get-go, so that it will take a little bit of time in the beginning, but in the end, it will be super beneficial. Yeah, and thanks again for being here, and thanks for the great moderation.
Thanks, Yann. George, Joyce first. I think it's 5:38 p.m. in Kenya. No pressure. What do you want people to remember when they go out from this seminar? And then
thanks.
followed with George.
All right, thank you. I think I wanted to just touch a bit around the AI supply chain, because I think from the meeting we had last week, we were given the link to the anatomy of an AI system, and I think I would interest everyone here to get to it and read and understand what it means when we think about an AI system, that it's not just about the model, but there's a lot more that we have to think about in terms of our entire ecosystem. It goes down really deep into the data, who's annotating the data, and it's not just about annotating or labeling. For at what level are you doing this annotation of the data? Is it paid? Is it recognized? Is it not recognized? Then you go all the way to even think about the materials for the computers that are needed, or for the GPUs or the data centers that are needed to run these AI models, and what that means for the communities where these actual materials are being taken. So it's really a very comprehensive study for us to understand this supply chain, and it will help us to reflect a little bit more as we try to do the models, that it's not just about the AI models themselves, but also the communities that are involved and the way the communities are going to be involved. And then I think my final takeaway is really around the communities. We've talked about that, building with communities. One piece of work that we found valuable was when we did evaluation of the ASR models, but we did them by taking out these ASR models to the actual communities that speak the languages, because we're doing a study around building ASR models for different African languages, and so we got the linguists who came in to help us evaluate the models across their different languages like Sheng or Igbo, and it was really incredible to understand what makes sense for them when an ASR model is performing. What we think is important for us as the AI developers is very different for them as the actual one, end users of the tools that we are developing, but two, the actual speakers of the languages for which we are developing these models. And I would empower everyone that when we are doing that, it's very, very critical that these linguists and the eventual users of the models are really involved and evaluating the output of the research that we are doing, because it will be very valuable input for us as we keep improving the work that we do. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Joyce. George, a few points and considering the policy coming up.
Yeah, so thank you so much. So I said in the beginning that I came this space because I noticed most policymakers are not technical, but what they do affects us as technical people in a very big way. So it's good that we are part of the process, that able to drive or direct or give inputs suggesting how we should be governed or we should be assisted in the process. So I want to challenge all of us. We are good in our modeling, in technical work activities, to see if eventually if you have a policy or a framework in place to actually govern how you do your things. Sometimes what I've noticed is most policymakers, they are fearful. Actually, that the fear sometimes drives the output. What are the issues, that the consequences of using these applications They may look at the risks involved in using the application that you come up with in the process. Sometimes making up rules that then stifle innovation in the process. But if you are part of the process, then we can suggest use of sandboxing where we have regulators and also developers in the room, discussing and agreeing on what should be done, of course, in a very safe space. But I need to challenge all of us, even as we become very technical doing our work, let's always take a keen eye on what's happening in the governance space by actually participating in the process.
Thank you. Thank you, George. I have such amazing panelists. I don't have much to add. Please, a round of applause for my great panelists. A round of applause for organizers, Steph and Millicent. Steph, where are you? Are you hiding? For making this happen every year. It's not an easy job. But more importantly, a round of applause to you, to the audience. Thank you very much again. Quick shout out again for the Lingua Africa call. I'm sure most of you are working in language space and all that. As I said, we are about to release this Lingua Africa call, which aims to provide cash, credit, and skill support for data collection, model development, and application-driven solutions, which will be out in a few days, actually. Hope you all apply for that, and I thank you all.
I also appreciate Girmaw for moderating the wonderful panel. Appreciate the panelists one more time. I'll hand over the mic to our very own Samuel Miner to just give us concluding remarks. Yeah.
All right. Hi, everyone. It's been an intense 2.5 going to 3.5 going to 4 hours, right? But it's been amazing. I think that's why we've all sat in and really enjoyed this. And thanks so much for making it so interactive. I've learned a lot, and I believe all of us have. And I was asked to give the closing remarks, and I don't think I need to add anything else. I have a 20-minute speech, which I don't think I should read. I'm joking. Right. So just to say thank you so much for making time to come and join us here at Microsoft Research. It's definitely critical for me to say thanks to Girmaw and Jackie, the heads of the 2 research labs, for supporting this seminar every year. And thanks a lot to all the presenters, participants, presenters, both the keynote speakers, the lightning talks. I had thought of just going through all of them, but then I figured, you know what? We've been here almost 4 hours, and I know we have a good retention capacity. But I think my charge for all of us, even as we leave this place today, is we've had lots of amazing work that is going on with different researchers, different teams. Take one person, one contact, one collaboration, one idea, and see how you can run with this and execute this. And the reason I'm saying that is because after this, we'll have a brief session here at the Terrace Day. I was told it's a northern one. I didn't know this is the northern side, for refreshments. But before that, we'll have a group photo. And so I'll be like, you know what, take a few minutes, get to talk to someone you didn't come with, or you've not been able to talk to, get interested in what they've been doing and what they plan to continue doing, and think how you can be able to collaborate more, because they say it's a journey that we have to walk all of us together. And from what even Prof. Vukosi mentioned, this is something that we as Africans and in Africa need to work on together. And so thank you so much for all the work that we've been doing. We are moving not just the needle, which is the next one of the needle, the spear. That one, yeah. We are all doing amazing work, and I'm actually fascinated and impressed. And so we'll keep interacting, we'll keep talking. We are all here at Microsoft Research, and AI for Good, sorry. Tunu may be angry with me if I leave them out. Yeah, we are all here trying to see how can we work together with the ecosystem, all the players, people who are interested to address these pertinent problems that we see as opportunities. So thank you so much. And yeah.
We usually host monthly seminars. So every year we host one grand seminar where we bring all researchers to the room and also, of course, online. But every month we also host, different talks around, interesting work that African researchers or even beyond are doing in the continent. So please join the mailing list to join our seminar series. And thank you very much, everybody.